Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie onward if Naruto wielded the lost Draconite gem as the Sage Dragon. Ranger Naruto x Kira Ford Power Rangers Dino Thunder. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Echo of a Lost World. The world did not end in fire, nor did it end in a roar. It ended in a silent, ravenous consumption of light. From his vantage point, floating in the Empyrean grace of the Six Paths Sage Mode, Naruto Uzumaki watched reality fracture. Below him, the battlefield was a tapestry of craters and corpses, a testament to a war that had demanded everything and still found them wanting. The air, once thick with the shouts of comrades and the clang of steel, now hummed with an unnatural thrum, the sound of a planet's lifeblood being siphoned into the monstrous ghetto statue. A grotesque parody of life summoned by the last, most desperate Otsutsuki. He felt them, the fading embers of his friends. Sakura's desperate, healing chakra was a flickering candle in a hurricane. Sasuke's Susanoo, a god construct of violet energy, was cracked in bleeding amethyst light. Kakashi, a silver-haired specter of defiance, was on his last breath. The entire Shinobi Alliance, the culmination of a lifetime spent bridging divides and forging bonds, was being ground into dust beneath the heel of a cosmic parasite. There was no grand strategy left. No secret jutsu, no last-minute reinforcement. There was only the abyss, and the choice of how to meet it. Kurama was a silent inferno in his gut, a presence of furious agreement. They had not spoken a word, but their decision was singular, absolute. He looked down at his own hands, one cloaked in the brilliant sun of his yang power, the other holding a truth-seeking orb, a sphere of absolute nothingness. He had been given the power to create, to heal, to build a world of peace. The irony was a bitter poison on his tongue. To save anything, he would have to become the ultimate destroyer. He closed his eyes, a flash of Iruka-sensei's proud smile, the weight of Jiraiya's hand on his shoulder, the phantom taste of Ichiraku ramen, the sound of his father's voice, the warmth of his mother's embrace. A lifetime of memories, of bonds, of promises, coalesced into a single, blinding point of resolve. Sorry, everyone. He didn't form a Rasengan. He didn't gather a Biju bomb. He simply opened the floodgates. He became a conduit, a living gateway between the world and himself. The natural energy of the planet, the very essence of life that the Otsutsuki coveted, surged into him. It was a torrent that would have turned any other sage to stone in an instant. It flooded his chakra coils, stretched his soul thin, and set every cell in his body screaming in a symphony of glorious agony. He took it all, the life force of the mountains, the whispers of the ancient forests, the deep, slumbering power of the oceans. Then, with a final, silent exhale, he gave it all back. He plunged towards the ghetto statue not as a man, but as a living star. The energy he released was not a controlled attack. It was a chaotic, uncontrolled detonation of pure life force, anathema to the statue's deathly purpose. It was the ultimate overcharge, a divine poison. The Otsutsuki's arrogant smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of genuine shock. It was the last thing Naruto saw before the world dissolved. Light did not just consume sound, it consumed sensation itself. The feeling of his own body vanished. The universe became a screaming, prismatic lattice of impossibilities. He was stretched across eternity, torn apart and led a million times in the span of a heartbeat. He saw timelines burn and futures die. He felt the cold, indifferent touch of the void between worlds. It was an agony beyond the comprehension of flesh and bone. And then, nothing. Darkness. Silence. The blessed relief of oblivion. Pain was the anchor that dragged him back to consciousness. It wasn't the clean, sharp pain of a kunai's edge or the fiery agony of a jutsu's burn. This was a deep, grinding, full-body trauma, the pain of a thing that had been fundamentally broken and then roughly hammered back into shape. He felt the jagged end of a broken rib grate with every shallow breath. His nerve endings fizzed with the memory of being unmade. The first sense to return was touch. The rough, scraping bark of a tree against his cheek. The damp, cloying suck of mud against his fingers. The chilling wetness of his own tattered orange and black jacket, now more rag than uniform, plastered to his skin. Then came smell. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of pine and decaying leaves, but it was fundamentally wrong. The subtle, ever-present hum of the world's chakra was gone. He could feel no familiar signatures, no echo of the elemental nations. The very atmosphere felt alien, breathing it in was like drinking foreign water. It sustained him, but it did not belong to him. He forced his eyes open. A canopy of unfamiliar green vase swayed against a sky of the most piercing, indifferent blue. The light was different, the shadows fell at an angle his instinct screamed was incorrect. A small, brown-furred creature with a bushy tail chittered at him from a branch before scampering away. It wasn't any animal he recognized. Panic, cold and sharp, tried to claw its way up his throat. He ruthlessly suppressed it. A shinobi did not panic. A shinobi assessed. He pushed himself up, his muscles screaming in protest. A wave of dizziness washed over him, and he leaned his forehead against the rough bark of the tree, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The world spun, a nauseating kaleidoscope of green and brown. It was then that he felt it. The emptiness. It was a hollow crater in the very center of his being. A vast, echoing void where a blazing sun had once resided. He clutched his stomach, his fingers pressing against the faint, swirling lines of the 8 trigram seal, now inert and cold as a gravestone. Kurama was gone. The realization hit him not with a roar, but with a profound, soul-crushing silence. The acerbic, gravelly voice that had been his constant companion since birth, the grumpy roommate in his soul. The partner with whom he had saved the world, gone. The silence in his mind was a physical weight, a suffocating absence that was so much louder than any shout had ever been. He was alone, utterly, completely alone for the first time in his life. A raw, animalistic sound of grief tore from his throat, more sob than scream. He slammed his fist against the tree, the impact a dull thud that sent a shockwave of agony up his arm. The pain was welcome. It was real. It was something to focus on besides the gaping wound in his soul. He stayed there for a long time, head pressed against the tree, as the foreign sun filtered through the alien leaves. He was adrift in an unknown sea, his compass shattered, his anchor lost to the depths. He was Naruto Uzumaki, the hero of the 4th Great Ninja War, the child of prophecy. The 7th Hokage candidate, and it all meant nothing. Here, he was just a man, broken and bleeding in a forest that shouldn't exist. Slowly, methodically, he began to push the grief down. He compartmentalized it, packed it away in a shadowed corner of his mind where it could fester in private. Grief was a luxury. Survival was a necessity. He peeled himself from the tree and began the shinobi's ritual of assessment. His left leg was fractured, a simple hairline break he could manage. 3 broken ribs, countless lacerations and contusions. His chakra reserves were dangerously, terrifyingly low. The massive expenditure, the dimensional transit, and the loss of Kurama had left him feeling like a husk. The vast ocean of energy he once commanded was now a shallow pond. Yet, he knew instinctively that his shallow pond was likely still a sea compared to anyone native to this place, whatever this place was. His gear was a wreck. His jacket was torn to ribbons. His pants were functional, if barely. His shinobi sandals were gone, his feet bare and caked in mud. A single holster on his right leg remained, containing 3 kunai. 3 simple, perfectly balanced blades. They felt wonderfully, blessedly real in his hand. Tucked into the small of his back, miraculously intact, was a single, heavily sealed scroll. A repository of fuinjutsu knowledge, a last gift from his father's legacy. It was all he had left of his old life. He needed to move, to find shelter, information, water. The fundamental tenets of survival. He closed his eyes, forcing his breathing to even out, and drew on the world around him. He reached out, not for chakra, but for the natural energy that permeated everything. It was the core of Sage Mode, a skill that was uniquely his, independent of Kurama. The world exploded into life. The energy here was different. It was raw, wild, chaotic. In his homeland, natural energy was a serene, flowing river. Here, it was a raging, untamed ocean, crashing against the shores of reality. It was powerful, intoxicating, and dangerous. He could feel the life of every plant, the skittering fear of every insect, the slow, ponderous thoughts of the ancient trees. But there were no human signatures. No chakra. Just this raw, vibrant, and utterly alien energy field. It was everywhere, a grid of unseen power that connected everything. He drew a small, careful amount of it into himself. His body screamed in protest for a moment before his sage training took over, harmonizing the foreign energy. The world snapped into hyper-focus. His senses sharpened to an impossible degree. The hairline fracture in his leg began to knit itself together with agonizing slowness. The whisker-like marks on his cheeks, once a sign of Kurama's influence, now seemed to darken, becoming more defined. A permanent scar of his connection to nature itself. With his enhanced senses, he could hear it. A low, rhythmic roaring sound in the distance. It was consistent, repetitive. A machine. And where there were machines, there were people. He began to move, his bare feet making no sound on the forest floor. He was a ghost, a remnant of a dead world, and he moved with the grim purpose of a man with nothing left to lose. The forest gave way to a sight so bizarre it made Naruto pause, his mind struggling to categorize the information. A wide river of hard, black stone flowed through the landscape. And upon it, metal beasts of impossible shapes and colors roared past at incredible speeds. He watched from the concealment of a thicket, his sage-enhanced eyes analyzing the cars. They were enclosed, moving without beasts to pull them, gleaming under the afternoon sun. Beyond the black river lay a settlement. A town. The buildings were strange geometric shapes of glass, steel, and colored stone. Reaching towards the sky in a way that defied the graceful, sloping architecture of Konoha. It was a world of harsh angles and blinding reflections. This was not just another country. This was another world entirely. The confirmation settled in his stomach like a lead weight. There was no going back. He needed to get closer, but he couldn't walk into that settlement looking as he did. He was a walking ghost, a relic of a forgotten war. He needed clothes, information, and a way to understand the language that drifted on the wind, a sharp, flowing tongue that his sage mode was already beginning to decipher, translating the intent and emotion behind the sounds and slowly building a dictionary in his mind. He was about to skirt the edge of the town, to find a less populated area to observe. When a sound cut through the air. A scream. It was high-pitched, laced with genuine terror. His body moved before his mind had a chance to argue. The debate of whether to get involved, to maintain his hidden status, was rendered moot by the ingrained instinct of a lifetime spent protecting others. He flowed through the trees, a silent, blonde blur, his senses locked onto the source of the distress. He arrived at the edge of a wide, green park. A scattering of civilians, 3 teenagers and an older woman, were cowering, their faces pale with fear. Standing over them were creatures that seemed to have clawed their way out of a nightmare. They were bipedal, vaguely reptilian monstrosities, their skin the color of polished obsidian, with blank, glowing red eyes and vicious-looking claws. They moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, a grotesque fusion of dinosaur and machine. Naruto's mind, the mind of a veteran warrior, analyzed them in a fraction of a second. Tyrannodrones. The word surfaced in his mind, gleaned from the panicked thoughts of the cowering humans. Their movements were clumsy, their center of gravity too high. They were strong, but slow. Predictable. Cannon fodder. But cannon fodder could still kill. One of them raised a clawed hand, preparing to strike the woman who had stumbled and fallen. There was no time for jutsu. No time for dramatic entrances. There was only time for brutal efficiency. He exploded from the tree line. To the onlookers, it was as if the air itself had solidified into a human form. One moment there was nothing, the next. A figure in tattered orange and black was standing between them and the monsters. The first Tyrannodrone didn't even have time to register his presence. Naruto's hand, fingers rigid and stiff, lanced out like a striking snake. A spearhand strike, delivered with the full force of his body, impacted the drone's neck joint. There was a sickening crunch of metal and synthetic cartilage, and the Cr. Eacher's head lolled to the side at an impossible angle as its body collapsed, inert. A second drone swung a clumsy fist. Naruto swayed beneath it, the wind of its passage stirring his spiky, blonde hair. He moved inside its guard, his body flowing like water. His right hand shot out, grabbing the drone's extended arm. He spun with the creature's momentum, his leg sweeping out and shattering its KN. joint with a kick that sounded like a gunshot. As the drone buckled, Naruto used its own body as a springboard, vaulting into the air and bringing his heel down on the back of a third drone's head, driving its face into the hard-packed earth with enough force to shatter its internal mechanisms. He landed in a low crouch, his piercing blue eyes, cold as glacial ice, scanning the remaining drones. There were 4 left. They hesitated, their rudimentary programming struggling to comprehend the whirlwind of silent, efficient violence that had just dismantled 3 of their number in less than 5 seconds. It was all the time he needed. He blurred forward. One of the kunai from his holster was suddenly in his hand. He didn't throw it, he used it as an extension of his fist, plunging it into the glowing red optic of one drone, then twisting it to sever the primary power conduits within. He used the dying drone's body as a shield, absorbing a clumsy blow from another, before lashing out a kick that caved its chest cavity in. He was a phantom, a whisper of death moving among them. A palm strike to a torso that ruptured internal workings. A sweeping leg that took 2 of them off their feet. A final, precise kunai throw that buried itself in the throat of the last one standing. Silence descended upon the park. It had taken, perhaps, 30 seconds. 30 seconds of precise, economical, and utterly ruthless violence. He stood amongst the wreckage of the fallen drones, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. He wasn't even breathing hard. He flicked his kunai once, cleaning it of synthetic fluid, and slid it back into its holster. He turned his gaze to the civilians. They were staring at him, their mouths agape, a mixture of awe and terror in their eyes. He gave them a single, sharp nod, a gesture of reassurance that felt alien on his own face, and then turned to melt back into the shadows of the forest. He had lingered too long. He had revealed himself. A foolish, emotional mistake. But as he turned, his eyes met hers. She was standing slightly apart from the others, a guitar case slung over her shoulder. She had dark hair, sharp, intelligent eyes, and a rebellious set to her jaw. She wasn't looking at him with the same terrified awe as the others. Her gaze was sharp, analytical. It was the look of someone who understood power, who recognized it in its rawest form. He saw shock, yes, but also a deep, burning curiosity. There was something else, too. A flicker of recognition, not for him, but for the way he moved, the feral grace, the predatory stillness. It resonated with something inside her, something wild and ancient. For a heartbeat, their gazes locked. In her eyes, he saw a reflection of this strange, new world, confusing, dangerous, but perhaps, not entirely empty. In his, she saw an exhaustion so profound it seemed to sink into his very bones, a sorrow that could drown worlds. Then, he was gone. He didn't run. He simply stepped back into the shadows of the tree line and vanished, leaving behind only the scent of ozone, the wreckage of the mechanical dinosaurs, and a silence filled with impossible questions. Kira Ford stood frozen, her hand clutching the strap of her guitar case so tightly her knuckles were white. The other students were babbling, a frantic, high-pitched release of adrenaline. Someone was calling the police. But Kira didn't hear them. Her world had narrowed to the spot where the mysterious man had stood. She had seen the Power Rangers fight. It was a spectacle of bright colors, loud explosions, and quippy one-liners. It was heroic. It was grand. This had been none of those things. This had been terrifying. It was the silence that got to her. The complete and utter lack of wasted motion. The man hadn't fought the drones. He had systematically dismantled them, like a surgeon removing a tumor. There was no joy in his movements, no righteous fury. Only a cold, grim purpose. He moved with a speed and grace that seemed to defy physics. A predatory economy of violence that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. When their eyes had met, she had felt it. A jolt. It was like the feeling she got right before she morphed. The thrum of her pterodactyl Dino gem waking in her soul. The man's power felt natural, ancient. It was a raw, untamed energy that called to the primal core of her own. But it was his eyes that would haunt her. So incredibly blue, yet so utterly devoid of light. They were the eyes of a soldier who had seen the end of the world and had somehow kept on walking. Who was he? He wasn't a ranger. He wore no armor, shouted no catchphrase. He was something else entirely. Something older, and infinitely more dangerous. Her journalist-in-training friend, Cassidy Cornell, would have a field day with this. A mysterious new hero in Reefside. But Kira knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that hero wasn't the right word. He hadn't saved them out of a sense of heroic duty. He had moved with the grim, weary obligation of a man for whom violence was as natural as breathing. He had protected the innocent because that was his function. She had 1,000 questions, but one screamed louder than the rest. As she watched the spot where he had vanished, she couldn't help but wonder what kind of world could possibly create a man like that. Deep in the woods, Naruto lay, Ned against the cool stone of a small cave he had found. The brief exertion had cost him more chakra than he would have liked. The emptiness left by Kurama made him feel fragile, vulnerable in a way he hadn't since he was a child. The fight had been simple, but it was a stark reminder of his new limitations. He couldn't rely on massive reserves or monstrous power anymore. He had only his skills, his wits, and the natural energy of this strange new world. He slipped back into sage mode, letting the vibrant life force of the forest wash over him, soothing his frayed nerves and slowly replenishing his energy. It was then that he felt it again, stronger this time. It was a pulse, a slow, rhythmic thrum from deep within the earth. It wasn't the wild, chaotic energy of the world at large. This was something different. It was concentrated, ancient, and impossibly powerful. It felt refined, almost sentient. It hummed on a frequency that resonated perfectly with his sage mode, a clear, pure note in a symphony of chaos. It was a call, a beacon in the darkness of this alien reality. It felt ancient, draconic, and strangely welcoming. He pushed himself off the cave wall, his blue eyes turning in the direction of the pulse. He didn't know what it was. It could be a trap. It could be something beyond his comprehension. But it was also the first thing in this world that felt like more than just a random collection of matter and energy. It felt like a purpose. A thread to pull in the tangled mess his life had become. With a newfound resolve firming his jaw, he began to move towards the source of the call. He was a stranger in a strange land, a warrior without a war, a hero without a home. But for the first time since he had woken up in this impossible world, he had a direction. And for a shinobi like Naruto Uzumaki, that was enough. The dragon was calling its sage, and he would answer. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Serpent's Call. Survival was a calculus of information. In the chaotic aftermath of a battle, or the disorienting reality of a new world, knowledge was the ultimate weapon, more potent than any kunai or jutsu. For 2 days, Naruto Uzumaki became a ghost in the machine of Reefside, California. He was a whisper in the alleys, a fleeting shadow on the rooftops, a silent observer in the crowds. The vibrant, chaotic energy of this new world, once a disorienting roar, as now a symphony he was slowly learning to conduct through the discipline of his sage mode. He learned that the metal beasts were called cars, and they slavishly followed the painted lines on the black rivers of asphalt. He learned that people carried small, glowing rectangles called cell phones, that connected their voices across vast distances, a crude but effective form of the Yamanaka clan's telepathy. They worshipped commerce in grand temples called malls, and derived sustenance from chemically engineered foods wrapped in brightly colored plastics. It was a world of bewildering convenience and profound disconnection. People lived packed together in their city, yet he felt a palpable loneliness radiating from them, a stark contrast to the tightly knit, clan-based life of Konoha. His sage mode granted him a unique advantage in this information war. He didn't just see the world, he felt it. He could stand on a rooftop and feel the collective emotional state of the city below, a low-grade hum of anxiety, punctuated by spikes of joy, anger, and fear. He learned the local language not by rote memorization, but by absorbing the intent and emotional context behind the spoken words. The patterns snapping into place with supernatural speed. Within 48 hours, he could understand the rapid-fire slang of the local teenagers and the clipped, professional jargon of the businesspeople. Speaking it would take practice, but understanding was the key. On the second day, he saw them again. The protectors of this world. The Dino Rangers. He was perched atop the clock tower of Reefside High School, a vantage point that offered a panoramic view of the town, when the telltale shimmer of warped space signaled Mesogog's attack. A creature that looked like a grotesque fusion. of a chameleon and a satellite dish materialized in the downtown square, firing beams of disruptive energy that caused electronics to short out and cars to swerve. Then, the response. 3 streaks of color, red, blue, and yellow, converged on the scene. Naruto watched, his blue eyes narrowed in critical analysis. They were powerful, he had to grant them that. Their transformation, the morphing W, as an instantaneous application of armor and power, drawing on that structured grid of energy he now recognized as a constant, underlying layer of this reality. The Red Ranger, Connor McKnight, was the vanguard. All brute force and aggressive forward momentum. He fought with the unrestrained power of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, his every move a devastating blow. Strength without discipline, Naruto assessed. He overcommits on every strike, leaving his flank exposed for a full half-second. Exploitable. The Blue Ranger, Ethan James, was the tactician. His skin could harden into a defensive shield, and he fought with a more measured defensive style. He created opportunities for his teammates, his Triceratops-themed powers forming a stable anchor for the team's offense. Smart. Defensive. But his patterns are rigid. 3 defensive moves, then a counter. Predictable. The Yellow Ranger, the girl from the park, Kira Ford, was speed. She moved with an aerial grace, her pterodactyl-themed abilities allowing for short bursts of flight and a devastating sonic scream. She was a whirlwind of swift, precise strikes, a scalpel to the Red Ranger's sledgehammer. Fast, unpredictable movements, but she relies too heavily on her primary ability. Force her into a prolonged ground battle, limit her verticality, and she becomes vulnerable. Their teamwork was raw, unrefined. They communicated verbally, shouting strategies in the heat of battle. A rookie mistake that a seasoned shinobi would never make. They won, eventually, overwhelming the monster with a combined energy blast from their signature weapons. It was flashy, destructive, and deeply inefficient. They fought like powerful children, gifted with immense strength but lacking the thousands of hours of brutal, life-or-death training that forged a true warrior. He respected their courage, their drive to protect. But he also saw a dozen ways their enemies could, and eventually would, exploit their weaknesses. He wasn't judging them. It was simply an observation. A calculation. He had no stake in their war. He was a ghost, and ghosts did not meddle in the affairs of the living. His focus was elsewhere, pulled by the insistent, rhythmic pulse from deep within the earth. It had been a constant companion for the past 2 days, a low thrum at the edge of his senses, a siren song that promised something. Power, answers, a connection. He didn't know, but it was the only thing in this entire dimension that seemed to recognize him. It resonated with the natural energy flowing through him, a harmony that felt both ancient and deeply personal. The pulse emanated from a forested hill on the outskirts of town, crowned by a large, modern house of glass and redwood that seemed strangely out of place. He had observed it from a distance. A black-clad man, whom he identified from news reports as the legendary Drive, Tommy Oliver, lived there. He was their mentor, the veteran behind the rookies. The energy signature of the house was immense, a nexus of that morphing grid energy. It was the Ranger's base of operations. The source of the pulse was directly beneath it. Getting in would be a challenge. The property was undoubtedly protected by the best technology this world had to offer. But technology was predictable. It followed rules. Naruto Uzumaki did not. As dusk bled purple and orange across the sky, he began his approach. Kira Ford strummed a discordant chord on her unplugged electric guitar, the metallic twang echoing the frustration in her soul. She was sitting on the hood of her car at a scenic overlook, staring down at the lights of Reefside as they began to glitter in the twilight. They had won. They had beaten the monster of the day, saved the city, done the whole hero thing. So why did she feel so hollow? The age was seared into her mind's eye, a flash of tattered orange, the impossible speed, the cold, silent efficiency. The man in the park. You're brooding, a voice said, pulling her from her thoughts. Connor McKnight leaned against the car beside her, his soccer star confidence worn like a second skin. We kicked some serious monster butt today. You should be celebrating. Or, writing a song about my awesome leadership. Right, Kira said, not looking at him. The Connor McKnight anthem. I'll get right on that. Ethan James walked up, tapping away at his Dino PDA. Actually, my battle metrics indicate my Tricera shield absorbed 73% of the direct energy blasts, creating the tactical opening for Connor's Tyranno staff strike. So, technically, dude, nobody cares about your nerd numbers, Connor shot back. Kira sighed, the sound lost in the wind. They didn't get it. They couldn't. They saw the world in black and white, Rangers versus monsters. But she had seen something else. Something gray and terrifyingly real. Did it seem easy to you guys today? She asked, her voice quiet. Connor scoffed. Easy. That thing almost turned my car into a toaster. I wouldn't call that easy. No, I mean, our fights. She elaborated, struggling to find the words. It's all so loud. We yell, we shoot, things explode. It's a big show. She paused, then looked at them, her eyes serious. The other day, in the park, I saw someone else. He took out, like, 7 Tyrannodrones in 30 seconds. And he didn't make a sound. Ethan looked up from his PDA, intrigued. Wait, what are you talking about? Dr. O didn't say anything about another operative. He wasn't an operative, Kira insisted. He was different. The way he moved, there was nothing wasted. It wasn't about looking cool or being a hero. It was just an execution. And then he was gone. Connor crossed his arms, skeptical. So, what, there's some ninja running around Reefside. You probably just imagined it after getting your bell rung by that last drone. Kira felt a flash of anger. I know what I saw, Connor. Her voice was sharp. She remembered the man's eyes, the profound sadness that seemed to swallow the sky. You couldn't imagine a thing like that. That kind of pain had to be earned. He was real. She had spent the last 2 days trying to find him. She'd gone back to the park, sketching his face from memory in her notepad, showing it to people. Asking if they'd seen a blonde man in a torn orange jacket. Nothing. It was like he had literally vanished from the face of the earth. But the memory of him, the feeling of that raw, untamed power, lingered. It was a mystery she couldn't let go, a song she needed to hear the end of. Naruto moved through the darkening woods around the Oliver property like a whisper of wind. The perimeter was protected by a network of motion sensors and infrared cameras, woven into the treeline. To a normal intruder, it was an impenetrable wall. To a sensor-type shinobi in Sage mode, it was a brightly lit schematic. He could feel the faint electronic hum of each camera, the precise cone of its vision. He could sense the subtle disruption in the natural energy field caused by the invisible laser grids. He moved through the gaps with a liquid grace that defied the laws of physics, his bare feet making no purchase on the damp earth, leaving no tracks. He didn't bypass the security system. He simply moved through the spaces where it wasn't. It was a dance he had performed 1,000 times in the hostile territories of the elemental nations. He reached the base of the house, a testament to modern architecture that felt alien against the ancient forest. The pulse was stronger here, a palpable thrum that vibrated up through the soles of his feet. It was coming from beneath the house, deep underground. He found what he was looking for near the foundation at the rear of the property, a cleverly disguised ventilation shaft, covered by a heavy metal grate. He placed his fingers on the grate. It was magnetically locked, interwoven with a high-voltage deterrent. Child's play. He channeled a minuscule, precise amount of chakra, a tool he now used with the care of a surgeon, into his fingertips. He wasn't overpowering the lock. He was interfacing with it, feeding it a false signal, a loop of code that told it everything was normal. The magnetic clamp clicked open with a soft, almost inaudible sigh. He slipped into the darkness of the shaft, pulling the grate shut behind him. The air inside was cool and smelled of ozone and machinery. He was in the belly of the beast. He navigated the labyrinthine ventilation system with the ease of a serpent, his sage senses providing a perfect three-dimensional map of the structure around him. He felt the vast, cavernous pace of the hangar where the Zords were kept, the hum of the central computer in the command center, and the quiet, focused energy of 2 individuals within. Dr. Oliver was not present, but someone else was. He followed the siren song of the gem, the pulse growing stronger, more insistent, until it was a resonant hum that seemed to vibrate in his very bones. It led him to a section of the Ventilot ion system that opened into a natural cavern, an ancient lava tube that the modern base had been built around. The air here was different. It was thick with age and a power that had slumbered for millennia. He dropped silently from the vent, landing in a low crouch on the uneven stone floor. The cave was vast, the darkness absolute. But in sage mode, he saw it all, bathed in the soft glow of natural energy. And he saw her. A woman with short, dark hair stood before a bank of complex scientific instruments, her back to him. A holographic screen floated in the air beside her, displaying a complex waveform that spiked in perfect rhythm with the pulse he was feeling. She was bathed in the screen's blue light, her brow furrowed in intense concentration. The resonance is off the charts, she murmured to herself, her fingers flying across a keyboard. It's not a seismic event, and it's not a morphing grid fluctuation. It's organic, almost biological, but the energy readings are unlike anything I've ever logged. It's as if the planet itself is trying to talk. Naruto remained perfectly still in the shadows, his presence completely masked. This was the base's keeper. The brain behind the brawn. The woman, Haley Zichter, let out a frustrated sigh and ran a hand through her hair. The energy surge 2 days ago had been the catalyst. An anomaly of unprecedented scale had appeared and the N vanished in the forest just outside Reefside. It left behind no radiation, no dimensional scarring, just a lingering energy signature that defied all known models. And ever since, this ancient cavern beneath the base had come alive, emitting a signal that was growing stronger by the hour. She turned from her console and walked towards the center of the cavern. There, set upon a simple, naturally formed stone pedestal, was a geode the size of a man's head. It looked unremarkable at first glance, a rough, crystalline rock. But Naruto could see it for what it truly was. The rock was merely a shell, a chrysalis. Inside, a storm of incandescent green and gold energy swirled, the source of the powerful, draconic pulse. It was a caged star, a sleeping god. Haley placed a hand on the geode, her expression a mixture of scientific curiosity and reverent awe. "What are you?" she whispered. "It is a question you should be asking of me." The voice was low, calm, and came from the shadows directly behind her. Haley didn't scream. Her training with Tommy Oliver, her years of dealing with the bizarre and the dangerous, had forged her nerves into steel. She spun around, a compact, high-frequency Y-sonic emitter snapping into her hand from a wrist-mounted device. She aimed it at the darkness, her heart hammering against her ribs. A figure emerged from the shadows, stepping into the faint light of her equipment. He was tall, with sun-streaked blonde hair and eyes of an impossible, piercing blue. He wore the tattered remnants of some kind of uniform, and his feet were bare, yet he moved with a silence and confidence that was utterly unnerving. It was the man from Kira's description, the sketch she had shown her just that morning. "Who are you?" Haley demanded, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "How did you get past my security?" "Your security is designed to detect threats that move within the physical world," Naruto stated, his voice a quiet baritone. The language felt thick and clumsy on his tongue, but he formed the words with care. "I do not." His eyes weren't focused on her, or the weapon in her hand. They were locked on the geode, his expression one of intense, focused recognition. It was like a man lost at sea finally spotting a lighthouse. "That energy signature," Haley said, her mind racing, connecting the dots. "The anomaly from 2 days ago, that was you. Your arrival activated this." She gestured with her head towards the pulsing geode. "What are you?" "An alien. A metahuman. I am a shinobi," Naruto said, the word feeling foreign and hollow in this place. "It meant nothing here, and I am lost." He took a step closer, his gaze never leaving the geode. "That stone. It called to me." Haley's scientific mind word, shinobi, a term from feudal Japan. A warrior of stealth and espionage. It didn't fit. His energy readings were off the scale. The way he spoke of her security system implied an ability to perceive things on a level she couldn't comprehend. "It's been dormant for 65 million years, Haley found herself explaining, her scientific curiosity beginning to override her sense of danger. "Legends from local Native American tribes call it the heart of the serpent. They said it sleeps until a warrior with a spirit of a dragon and the wisdom of a sage arrives to claim it." She had always dismissed it as folklore. Now, looking at the man before her, she wasn't so sure. A dragon's spirit, and a sage's wisdom, Naruto repeated softly, a flicker of something, sadness, irony, in his eyes. He reached a hand out, not towards the geode, but towards the air in front of it, as if feeling its energy. This, natural energy, in your world, it is chaotic, untamed. But this is different. It is harmonized, balanced. You can feel the energy. Haley asked, lowering her weapon slightly. I can only read its output. You're describing the qualitative aspects of a quantum field. How? I do not read it, Naruto corrected gently. I am a part of it. I can touch it, shape it. To demonstrate, he held up his palm. A small, perfect sphere of swirling blue chakra, a miniature Rasengan, spun to life in his hand, silent and contained. It emitted no heat, but the sheer density of the energy it contained made Haley's sensors scream. The waveform on her holographic screen went jagged, the readings spiking into the red. Impossible, she breathed. A stable, self-contained energy vortex. No power source, no waste heat. That violates several fundamental laws of thermodynamics. My world has different laws, Naruto said, dissipating the Rasengan with a thought. The ground began to tremble. A low, guttural roar echoed from the woods above, a sound of tearing metal and splintering wood. A new icon flashed on Haley's screen. A hostile entity, large, and heading directly for them. Mesogog, she spat, her attention snapping back to the mission. She tapped her headset. Tommy, we have a breach. A new monster just burrowed into the cave system. It's heading for the lower cavern. On screen, a 3D map showed a red, monstrous icon tearing through the earth at an impossible speed. Its trajectory was a straight line, aimed directly at the geode. It's not after us, Haley realized, her eyes wide. It's after the gem. Naruto's posture had changed. The weary traveler was gone, replaced by the veteran warrior he was. He stood between Haley and the direction of the oncoming threat, his body coiled with a dangerous stillness. This Mesogog, he said, his voice dropping to a low, serious tone. He is your enemy. He's an enemy to the whole planet, Haley confirmed, backing towards her console to activate the base's internal defenses. Then he is my enemy as well, Naruto declared. It was not a boast. It was a simple statement of fact. This gem, this strange, resonant power, was the first thing that had reached out to him in this empty world. It was a connection, and Naruto Uzumaki protected his connections. The far wall of the cavern exploded inwards, showering the chamber in rock and debris. A creature pushed its way through the opening, a horrifying beast that looked like a Ross between a mole and a computer motherboard. Wires and circuits were embedded in its rocky hide, and its claws were diamond-tipped drills, spinning with a deafening screech. Its head was a massive sensor array, which swiveled and focused on the geode, letting out a hungry, electronic chitter. It's a geofractor, Haley identified, her voice tight. Designed to track and absorb exotic energies. If it gets to that gem. The monster ignored them completely, its single-minded programming driving it towards the pedestal. Naruto moved to intercept. He was a blur of motion, but as he moved, the GEODE, the Draconite gem, seemed to respond. The pulsing light within intensified, its rhythm matching Naruto's own heartbeat. The call he had felt was no longer a whisper. It was a roar, a triumphant shish, out of recognition that echoed not in his ears, but in his very soul. The warrior had arrived, the serpent was awake, and the monster that had come to steal its heart was about to learn the difference between a simple energy source and the living spirit of a dragon. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Birth of a Sage. There was no preamble, no monstrous roar of challenge. The geofractor moved with the single-minded, silent efficiency of a machine built for one purpose. Its diamond-tipped claws, already spinning into a blur of motion, tore through the stone floor, propelling it forward with terrifying speed. Its target was not the humans in the room. Its optical sensors were locked on the soft, pulsing light of the Draconite gem. Haley instinctively scrambled back, her mind already processing, categorizing, and searching for a weakness. Its outer shell is a silicon carbide composite. It's designed for burrowing through mantle rock. Conventional weapons won't even scratch it. Her words were or the benefit of the mentor she knew was listening, but they served as a stark warning to the blonde warrior who now stood as the sole line of defense. Naruto didn't need the warning. He could feel it. The creature's hide was a dead zone. A place where natural energy was warped and twisted by the alien technology fused to its flesh. He moved to intercept, his body a fluid line of coiled potential. He didn't charge. He flowed, angling to put himself on a collision course with the monster's flank. The Geofractor, sensing an obstacle, swung one of its drill claws in a wide, decapitating arc. The air screamed as it passed. Naruto dropped, his body going completely parallel to the floor in a move that seemed to defy gravity, the spinning claws missing his head by a whisper. He pushed off with one hand, spinning like a top, and drove the heel of his bare foot into the monster's primary leg joint. The impact was immense. A shockwave rippled through Naruto's own body, and the sound was a flat, dead thump, like kicking a mountain. The Geofractor barely staggered. The joint was armored as heavily as the rest of its body. Naruto, however, felt a lance of pain shoot up his leg. It was like kicking solid steel. No external weak points, his mind catalogued with cold detachment. Brute force is inefficient. He landed silently, already moving. As the monster turned to face him, its drill claws spinning up again. Naruto blurred forward, moving inside the effective range of its primary weapons. His hands were a flurry of motion, not striking, but tapping, probing, searching for a seam, a port, a vulnerable conduit. His fingertips, glowing with a faint blue chakra, were as sensitive as any scanner. He found it, a recessed maintenance port just below the creature's armored shoulder. His hand, fingers rigid and together in a perfect spear hand, shot forward. A normal shinobi would have used a full-body strike to generate power. Naruto needed only an inch. His muscles contracted, channeling his chakra into a single, focused point. Jukenpo, the gentle fist style, learned through observation and countless spars. His aim was not to break the armor, but to inject his chakra directly into the creature's internal circuitry. The tips of his fingers slammed against the port. For a split second, he felt his chakra pour inside, a disruptive virus into a closed system. Then, the monster's own energy field reacted. A violent surge of crimson lightning erupted from the port, engulfing Naruto's arm. The pain was excruciating, a million volts of raw, weaponized electricity searing his nerve endings. He was thrown back, skidding across the stone floor, his arm smoking and temporarily paralyzed. The Geofractor let out a series of triumphant, metallic chirps. It had not only repelled his attack but had absorbed his chakra. Its own internal power readings flaring. Haley watched from her console, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and scientific fascination. It's an energy parasite. It's converting his chakra, adapting to it, using it to power itself. She understood now. This creature wasn't just a brute. It was a perfectly designed anti-energy weapon. From the smoking hole in the cavern wall, 3 streaks of colored light shot into the room, landing in a perfect 3-point stance between the monster and the pedestal. Looks like we're just in time for the party. Connor's voice, filtered through his helmet's comm, was brimming with confidence. Thunder. Dino power. Ha! They shouted in unison. The red, blue, and yellow Dino Rangers. They had arrived. Hira was the first to see him. Lying on the ground, clutching his smoking arm, was the man from the park. Her breath hitched. He was real. He was here. And he was hurt. A fierce, protective anger surged through her. What did you do to him? You oversized paperweight, she yelled, launching herself into the air. Terra scream. A wave of concentrated sonic energy, visible as a distortion in the air, slammed into the Geofractor. The monster shuddered, its metallic plates vibrating, but it held its ground. It angled its head, and a panel on its back opened, absorbing the sonic blast and converting it. Its red optical sensors glowed brighter. Hira, I think it like that, Ethan observed, his Tricera shield materializing on his arm. New plan. Connor, you go high, I'll go low. You got it. Tyranno staff. Connor roared, charging forward. The Rangers' assault was a textbook example of their style. Connor's raw power, Ethan's tactical defense, Hira's aerial harassment. It was a valiant, colorful, and utterly useless display. Every blast from Ethan's Tricera blaster was absorbed. Every powerful strike from Connor's Tyranno staff was met with unyielding armor, the kinetic energy siphoned away. The monster was a sponge for punishment. growing stronger with every attack they landed. Naruto pushed himself to his feet, his left arm hanging limp and useless at his side. The paralysis was fading, but the pain was a grinding fire. He watched the Rangers fight. He saw their courage, their determination to protect Haley, who was bravely calling out tactical data from behind her console. He saw their desperation as their most powerful attacks were rendered impotent. They were going to lose. They were feeding their enemy, draining their own reserves while their foe only grew more powerful. And when they were finished, the monster would take the gem, and likely kill the woman they were trying to protect. He looked at the Draconite gem. It was pulsing wildly now, its light a furious, desperate beacon. It was calling to him, not with a gentle song, but with a screaming, frantic plea. It offered power, immense, world-altering power. But Naruto had learned long ago that power always came with a price. He had held the power of a god in his hands and had lost his entire world as a consequence. He was tired of fighting. He was tired of being the chosen one, the hero, the sacrifice. He just wanted to be left alone. But then he looked at Kira. She swooped down, firing her Terra grips, putting herself between the monster and Haley's exposed position. It was a reckless, foolish move, born of pure protective instinct. And in that moment, Naruto saw not a Power Ranger, but a reflection of himself. He saw the same stupid, reckless, unwavering determination to protect the people behind him. He saw the spirit of a shinobi. His hesitation shattered. He could not stand by and watch others fight and die for his own selfish desire for peace. His purpose had never been a choice. It was an ingrained, fundamental part of his being. He was Naruto Uzumaki, and he protected people. He took a step forward, his one good arm outstretched. "Fine," he whispered to the roaring gem. "I'll answer." As if it understood, the Draconite gem exploded with light. It tore itself from the pedestal, a comet of green and gold energy, and shot across the cavern. It didn't just fly to him. It phased into him, striking him square in the chest with the force of a Biju bomb. Agony. It was the only word. It was a fire that consumed him from the inside out. He felt the gem merge with his very soul, its ancient drive. Iconic energy flooding his chakra network. It was a raging, untamed river carving new pathways through his body, forcibly rewriting his spiritual DNA. His own chakra, refined and controlled, fought back against the invasion. The two immense energies clashed within him, threatening to tear him apart atom by atom. He screamed, a raw, guttural sound of pure torment, and fell to his knees. The Rangers paused their attack, stunned by the blinding light and the man's agonized cries. "What's happening to him?" Ethan yelled over the din. "The gem, it's bonding with him." Haley realized, her voice a mixture of awe and horror. "His energy levels they're indescribable. The system can't even quantify it." Naruto felt his consciousness begin to shred. He was drowning in an ocean of raw power, a maelstrom of information from the morphing grid pouring into his mind. Images of Zordon, of Rita Repulsa, of countless Rangers across time and space. It was too much. It would destroy him. But then, a familiar calm settled over him. Sage mode. The one power that was truly his. He didn't fight the raging river of energy, he became the riverbank. He did not try to contain the flood, he guided it. His mastery of natural energy, honed through years of brutal training with the toads of Mount Myoboku, became the crucible in which the two warring energies could be forged into something new. His chakra became the structure. The gem's energy became the power. And his sage mode became the control. He felt the change. A suit, not of metal or spandex, but of solidified, harmonized energy, flowed over his body. It began as a tracery of glowing green lines, mapping his chakra network, then solidified into a form-fitting bodysuit of the deepest forest green, the color of the ancient woods of his home. Plated armor, the color of burnished gold, crystallized over his chest, shoulders, and legs. The armor was angular, layered, reminiscent of a samurai's war dress, yet impossibly sleek and modern. On his chest, the golden armor formed the stylized head of a dragon, its maw open in a silent roar. A helmet flowed over his head, the faceplate a polished, obsidian black. The visor glowed with a soft, golden light, shaped like the snarling teeth of a dragon. Two golden horns swept back from the temples, giving it a regal, predatory silhouette. The whisker marks on his cheeks, the last physical remnant of his past, glowed for a moment beneath the helmet before fading. He rose to his feet, no longer Naruto Uzumaki, the broken shinobi, but something more. The transformation was complete. He was encased in the power of a legend, reborn in the heart of a new world. He was the Sage Dragon Ranger. The Geofractor, sensing this new, overwhelming power source, turned its full attention to him. It emitted a concentrated beam of absorbed energy from its chest, the combined power of all the Ranger's attacks, focused into a single, devastating blast. The Sage Dragon Ranger didn't move to dodge. He simply raised his hand. A swirling vortex of green energy, shaped like a shield, materialized in front of his palm. The beam struck it and was not absorbed, not deflected, but simply unmade. The shield broke the energy down into its component parts, dissipating it harmlessly into the air. Silence fell over the cavern. The Rangers stared, their weapons lowered, their minds unable to process what they had just witnessed. His power, it's not just an addition, Haley whispered, staring at her readings. It's a synthesis. He's fused the energy of the gem with his own. He's not just wielding it. He is it. The Sage Dragon Ranger clenched his fist. He could feel it. The boundless, chaotic energy of the morphing grid, now tamed and filtered through the calm, focused lens of his sage mode. He could feel the pulse of the planet. The life in every living thing, amplified 1,000 times. He was connected to everything. He turned his head, his golden visor fixing on the Geofractor. He took a single step, and the ground beneath his feet cracked from the sheer, contained power of the movement. Then he vanished. He reappeared directly in front of the monster, moving faster than the Ranger's eyes could track. The Geofractor swung its drill claws, but the Ranger was no longer there. He was above it, behind it, beside it all at once, his movements so fast he seemed to be in multiple places simultaneously, a classic shinobi flicker technique, now amplified to an impossible speed. He didn't bother with flashy attacks. His hands, now encased in golden gauntlets, became blurs. He struck the monster's leg joint, the same one he had kicked before. This time, the armored plate didn't just dent. It shattered, imploding into a shower of metallic shards. He struck the creature's torso, not with a blast of energy, but with a precise palm strike that sent a harmonic resonance of sage energy through its body, bypassing the armor entirely and shorting out its internal power core. The Geofractor staggered back, screeching in a cacophony of electronic pain. Its systems were failing. Its energy absorption had been rendered useless. This new foe wasn't using energy attacks. He was a physical force of nature. The Ranger landed in a crouch 10 feet away. He raised his right hand, and particles of green and gold light coalesced from the air, forming a weapon in his grip. It was a 6-foot bow staff of jade green energy, with a gleaming golden dragon's head at one end and a razor-sharp spear tip at the other. The Dragonfang staff. With a flick of his wrist, he spun the staff, the motion a blur of deadly grace. "Your hunger ends now," he said, his voice altered by the helmet, deeper, layered with a faint, draconic resonance. He lunged. The Geofractor raised its claws to defend itself, but the Ranger's attack was a feint. He planted the butt of the staff on the ground, vaulted into the air, and brought the spear tip down in a devastating overhead strike. It plunged through the monster's head, shattering its central optic and burying itself deep within its chassis. The Geofractor went rigid. The light in its remaining sensors flickered and died. For a moment, it stood there, impaled and inert. The Ranger landed silently behind it. He held out his palm, and a swirling vortex of green and gold energy, interwoven with the familiar spiraling blue of his own chakra, formed in his hand. It was a Rasengan, but reborn, infused with the raw power of a dragon and the focused calm of a sage. "Sage art. Dragon's roar," he intoned. He thrust his palm forward, slamming the vortex into the monster's back. It wasn't an explosion. It was an implosion. The vortex of energy consumed the creature from the inside out, breaking it down on a molecular level. The Geofractor dissolved into a cascade of green data-like particles, which then faded into nothingness, leaving only the Dragonfang staff standing upright in the floor where the monster had been. The staff dematerialized, flowing back into the Ranger's body. The battle was over. He stood in the silent cavern, his back to the stunned Dino Rangers. The only sound was the faint, contented hum of the Draconite power now flowing through his veins. Just as the Rangers began to lower their weapons, a figure stepped out from the tunnel the monster had created. He was tall, dressed in black, with a calm, authoritative presence that commanded immediate respect. Dr. Tommy Oliver had arrived. He took in the scene with a practiced, analytical gaze. The destroyed monster, his stunned team, and the new, unknown ranger standing at the center of it all. The Sage Dragon Ranger turned to face them, his golden visor seeming to stare into each of their souls. "Who? What are you?" Connor finally managed to ask, his usual bravado completely gone, replaced by pure awe. The helmet seemed to hiss as it dissolved in a flow of green particles, receding back into the golden chestplate and revealing Naruto's face. His blonde hair was slightly disheveled, his blue eyes impossibly intense. A trickle of blood ran from one corner of his mouth, a testament to the strain of the transformation. He looked at the assembled Rangers, then at Tommy Oliver, and finally at Haley. Who was staring at him, her scientific mind completely and utterly captivated. He didn't offer a name or a catchphrase. His gaze was that of a weary veteran, a king on a foreign shore. A force of nature forced into a human form. He was a protector, but he was not one of them. He was an anomaly, a power unbound by their rules. The standoff was absolute, the cavern thick with unspoken questions and the palpable, humming energy of the newborn Sage Dragon Ranger. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. A Stranger in a Strange Land. The silence that followed the monster's dissolution was heavier than any sound. It was a vacuum, filled with the weight of the impossible. The Dino Rangers stood frozen, their brightly colored armor a stark contrast to the primeval darkness of the cavern. Before them, the man in the green and gold armor stood as still as a statue, a monument to a power they could not comprehend. Dr. Tommy Oliver was the first to move, his years of experience cutting out the awe that had paralyzed his students. He stepped forward, his boots crunching softly on the debris-strewn floor. His posture was non-threatening, but his eyes, sharp and analytical, missed nothing. He was cataloging the new Ranger's armor, his stance, the sheer, oppressive weight of the energy that rolled off him in palpable waves. "The helmet," Tommy said, his voice calm and steady, a captain's voice in a storm. "Take it off. Let's talk." For a long moment, the armored figure remained motionless. Then, with a sound like shifting jade, the helmet dissolved. It flowed back into the gold chest plate in a cascade of shimmering green particles, revealing the face of Naruto Uzumaki. The blood at the corner of his mouth, the faint tremor in his hands, the deep, soul-weary exhaustion in his blue eyes, they told a story of a victory that had cost him dearly. Connor finally found his voice, a choked whisper. "Dude, who are you?" Naruto's gaze swept over them, lingering for a fraction of a second on Kira, whose own wide eyes were filled with a maelstrom of shock, concern, and a dawning, terrifying excitement. He finally settled his gaze on Tommy Oliver, recognizing in him the alpha of this pack, the seasoned warrior among the fledglings. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki," he said. His voice was quiet, yet it carried the weight of command, each word formed with a deliberate precision. Had suggested the language was still a foreign landscape he was navigating. "As for what I am, that is a more complicated question." The green and gold armor dissolved from his body, not retracting, the oot seeming to be absorbed back into his skin, leaving him once more in his tattered orange and black remnants. The raw power that had filled the room receded, banked like a furnace, but the heat still remained. "You're not from around here," Tommy stated, not a question but a conclusion. "That power, it's connected to the morphing grid, but it's not from it. It's something else." Naruto gave a slow, weary nod. He had no allies here. No backup. No home to return to. Deception was a shinobi's greatest tool, but so was the strategic application of the truth. A complete lie would be sniffed out. A partial truth, wrapped in the enigma of his existence, would be far more effective. "I am from another world," he began, his voice low. The Dino Rangers exchanged stunned glances. Haley, still at her console, began typing furiously, her scientific mind alight with a billion questions. "My home was in the midst of a war against an enemy that consumed worlds. In the final battle, A desperate measure was taken. An attack that tore the fabric of reality. He paused, the memory a fresh, gaping wound in his soul. The lie was woven from the threads of his deepest pain. I was caught in the blast. I do not know if it was an attack, a miscalculation, or a desperate form of escape. All I know is that when I awoke, I was here. Alone. The silence in the cavern was now one of solemnity. The Rangers, who fought cartoonish monsters on a weekly basis, were suddenly confronted with the grim reality of a real war, of loss on a scale they couldn't imagine. Ethan pushed his blue helmet back, revealing a face etched with skepticism. So you're telling us you're an interdimensional soldier of fortune. How do we know you're not working with Mesogog? This could all be some elaborate trick. If I were working with your enemy, Naruto replied, his gaze shifting to Ethan, his blue eyes turning cold as a winter sea, you would all be dead. Your friend with the computer would be dead. And this base would be a crater. I would not have needed a monster as a distraction. The sheer, unvarnished confidence in his statement silenced Ethan completely. It wasn't a boast. It was a simple, chilling assessment of his capabilities. Tommy held up a hand, interceding before the tension could escalate. He's right. If he were an enemy, the fight would have gone very differently. He looked back at Naruto, his expression one of empathy. I know what it's like to be a warrior without a war. To be a stranger, even among friends. His eyes held a deep, ancient understanding. He had been the Green Ranger. The brainwashed soldier of Rita Repulsa. He understood the burden of power and the loneliness of being different. You have nowhere to go, Tommy continued. And I can't have a power of this magnitude running around unchecked. For your safety, and for ours, I'm offering you a place to stay. Here, we can help you understand this world, and in return, perhaps you can help us protect it. It was not a request. It was a command, wrapped in the velvet glove of an offer. It was also a lifeline. Naruto was exhausted, injured, and utterly alone. The thought of having a roof, a source of information, a place to heal and plan, was an irresistible lure. But it was also a cage, a leash. I am not your soldier, Naruto stated clearly. I'm not asking you to be, Tommy countered. I'm asking you to be an ally. There's a difference. Naruto considered the man before him. He could feel the power Tommy Oliver held in reserve, the signatures of multiple ranger forms layered over his being like the rings of a tree. This was a man who had lived a life of constant battle, yet his spirit was not broken. It was tempered, strong. He was a leader worth observing. I accept, Naruto said finally. For now. The unspoken addendum hung in the air, until I find a way home. Or until you give me a reason to leave. The next 24 hours were a blur of controlled chaos. Haley, her scientific curiosity overriding any sense of caution, immediately insisted on a full diagnostic. Naruto, wary but understanding the need for trust, allowed it. He stood in the center of the lab, shirtless, as her scanners mapped his chakra network. A system of energy pathways that defied her understanding of biology. It's incredible, she murmured, her eyes glued to a holographic display showing a glowing, blue schematic of his body. It's like you have a secondary nervous system, designed for the express purpose of channeling bioenergy. And your cellular regeneration is 20 times that of a normal human. Your body is constantly repairing itself. Naruto remained silent, enduring the scans with the stoicism of a man accustomed to being treated as a weapon. He found Haley's enthusiasm interesting. Shish. He wasn't looking at him with fear or awe, but with the voracious curiosity of a scholar discovering a lost language. She was trying to understand him, not just his power. It was a novel experience. The teen rangers watched from a distance. Their reactions a study in contrasts. Connor saw him as the ultimate rival, a new benchmark of strength to overcome. Ethan saw him as a dangerous variable, an unknown element in a carefully constructed equation. And Kira, she just watched him. She noted the network of faded scars that crisscrossed his back and torso, a roadmap of a violent past. She saw the way he held himself. A coiled stillness that even in a relaxed state promised lethal potential. She saw the profound loneliness in his eyes when he thought no one was looking. Later, Tommy approached him with 2 wooden bakken. I need to know what you can do. It wasn't a request. It was the only way 2 warriors of their caliber could truly communicate. They stood in the forest clearing behind the house. The setting sun casting long shadows. The air was cool and still. No powers, Tommy said, tossing him one of the wooden swords. No armor. No energy blasts. Just skill. Naruto caught the Bakken, its weight familiar and comforting in his hand. He settled into a low, ready stance, the picture of calm. Tommy mirrored him, his own stance a fusion of multiple martial arts, a testament to his long and varied career. There was no signal to begin. The fight simply started. Tommy was the first to move, a blur of black, testing Naruto's defenses with a series of swift, powerful strikes. Naruto deflected them with minimal movement, his Bakken a fluid extension of his arm. It was the immovable object versus the unstoppable force. Tommy's style was aggressive, powerful, designed to overwhelm. Naruto's was pure economy of motion, redirection, and counterattack. Tommy feinted high, then swept his leg low. Naruto leapt, using the top of Tommy's Bakken as a springboard to flip over his head, landing silently behind him. Before Tommy could even turn, the tip of Naruto's wooden sword was resting gently against the back of his neck. First point, Naruto said, his voice devoid of triumph. Tommy chuckled, a low, appreciative sound. Not bad. The spar escalated. It became a breathtaking dance of violence. Tommy, realizing a direct assault was useless, began to fight smarter. He used the environment, forcing Naruto into disadvantageous positions. But Naruto was a shinobi. The environment was his ally. He moved through the trees and shadows as if he were born to them. "You're holding back," Tommy grunted, parrying a strike that would have disarmed a lesser fighter. "So are you," Naruto replied calmly. It was true. Tommy wasn't tapping into the residual energies of his past powers. Naruto wasn't using chakra enhancement or his sage mode senses. This was a baseline test. A conversation. Then, Tommy changed. He shifted his stance, and for a fleeting second, Naruto felt a surge of savage, green energy. The Green Ranger. His fighting style became more feral, more aggressive, the Bakken wielded with the power of a dragon's claw. Naruto was forced back, his defense pure, instinctual reaction. Just as quickly, the energy shifted again. It became a pure, brilliant white. The White Ranger. His movements were now regal, precise, like a swordsman of the highest order. Then came the fiery crimson of Zio. A flurry of relentless, high-speed attacks. Naruto met each change with an adaptation of his own. Against the feral green, he was elusive water. Against the precise white, he was an unpredictable whirlwind. Against the fiery red, he was unyielding stone. Finally, Tommy settled back into his black Dino thunder energy, a fusion of experience and raw power. They met in the center of the clearing in a final, explosive clash of wood on wood. Their Bakken locked, inches from each other's faces. They were both breathing heavily, sweat beading on their brows. They had reached a perfect stalemate. They broke apart, a mutual and unspoken agreement. "The Draconite gem didn't make you a warrior," Tommy said, a look of profound respect on his face. "It just gave you a new weapon. You've been doing this your whole life." "Since I was a child," Naruto confirmed, his own respect for the veteran ranger growing. The man was a legend for a reason. He had faced a power he didn't understand and had met it head-on with skill and experience. "Get some rest," Tommy said, turning to head back to the house. "We've got a long road ahead of us." Later that night, Naruto found himself on the large wooden deck that overlooked the forest. The moon was a perfect, silver disk in the alien sky. He had been given a room, clean clothes, simple black cargo pants and a gray t-shirt that felt blessedly normal, and a meal. He should have felt relief. Instead, he felt a crushing sense of dislocation. Every face was new, every sound was strange, every breath he took was a reminder that he as trillions of miles in a whole dimension away from everything he had ever known or loved. "You can't sleep either, huh?" He didn't turn. He had sensed her approach from the moment she stepped out of the sliding glass door. Kira Ford walked up to the railing beside him, her arms wrapped around herself. "The mind is loud," he offered, the simple words a profound understatement. "Yeah, tell me about it," she said with a small, wry smile. "After a day like today, my brain is usually playing death metal on a loop." She leaned on the railing, her gaze fixed on the moon. "So, another world, is it? Was it like ours?" Naruto thought for a moment, picturing the sprawling forests of the Land of Fire, the bustling streets of Konoha with its Hokage monument carved into the cliff face. No, not at all. Better, worse, different, he said. There was less of this. He gestured vaguely at the house, the distant lights of the city. Less technology, but more connection to the land, to people. She heard the unspoken word, had. He spoke of his home in the past tense. I'm sorry, she said softly. Naruto just nodded, his eyes on the horizon. You know, Kira said, changing the subject, the way you moved today. In the fight with Tommy, it was like a dance. A really, really violent dance. A ghost of a smile touched Naruto's lips, the first one she had seen. It was a sad, fleeting thing. A shinobi's life is a dance on the edge of a blade. Back home, were you famous? She asked, her curiosity getting the better of her. Like a big hero. The smile vanished. The question struck a nerve he had been trying to numb. Some would have said so. His voice was flat, but a hero who outlives his own world is just a monument to failure. The raw, undiluted pain in that statement hit Kira with the force of a physical blow. She suddenly understood that the sadness in his eyes wasn't just sadness. It was grief. A profound, world-ending grief that he carried with him every second of every day. Her own teenage problems, her struggles with her music, her identity, they all seemed so small, so insignificant in the face of that. Without thinking, she reached out and placed a hand on his arm. His muscles tensed for a fraction of a second at the unexpected contact, then relaxed. He didn't pull away. They stood there in silence for a long time, two outsiders under a strange moon, a silent connection forming in the shared darkness. The next day, the practicalities of his new life asserted themselves. You can't walk around in torn-up ninja clothes forever, Tommy had stated that morning. It tends to attract attention. Kira, you're with him. Get him something that says, local, not interdimensional refugee. The trip to the Reefside Mall was a sensory assault. The loud music, the bright lights, the crush of people, it was a chaotic, unstructured mess that put Naruto's sage senses on high alert. Kira seemed to navigate it with an ease that baffled him, leading him into a store refilled with more clothes than the entire population of Konoha owned. As Kira was arguing with him about the merits of ripped jeans, it's a style. It is inefficient and provides poor protection. A new voice cut through the air. Well, what have we here? The brooding songstress and a mystery man. This has all the makings of a story. A young woman with an explosion of curly blonde hair and a microphone in her hand strode towards them, a long-suffering boy with a camera trailing in her wake. She had an ambitious, predatory gleam in her eyes. Cassidy Cornell, Reefside High's resident star reporter. Cassidy, now is not the time, Kira groaned. Cassidy ignored her completely, her full attention on Naruto. I don't believe we've met. Cassidy Cornell, Channel 6 news intern and future Pulitzer Prize winner. You look familiar. Have we met? Perhaps in a park, during a recent Tyrannodrome attack. Her eyes narrowed, a smirk playing on her lips. Naruto's expression remained placid, but his mind was already working. This woman was a threat. Not a physical one, but an informational one. She was a bloodhound, and he was the fox. I believe you are mistaken, he said, his voice perfectly even. Am I? Cassidy leaned closer, invading his personal space. Tall, blonde, piercing blue eyes, and a habit of showing up right around the time strange things happen. You match the description of a person of interest I'm investigating. Any comment on the new Dragon Ranger, who appeared yesterday? Some say he's a hero. I say he's a story that needs to be broken. No comment, Naruto said. He locked eyes with her for a brief second. In that second, he performed a simple, almost undetectable genjutsu, a trick of the mind. He didn't alter her perception of reality, just her short-term focus. He subtly made the mannequin behind him seem infinitely more interesting. You know, Cassidy said, her eyes suddenly glazing over as she looked past him. That is a fascinating choice of argyle sweater on that mannequin. Devin, get a shot of that. The texture, the pattern, it speaks to the disenfranchisement of modern youth. As Cassidy and the long-suffering Devin became engrossed in the fashion choices of a plastic model, Naruto grabbed Kira's arm. We should go. He pulled her towards the back of the store. When Kira looked back, Cassidy was snapping out of her daze, a confused look on her face. Realizing her prey had vanished. "How did you do that?" Kira asked, her voice a mix of admiration and confusion as they slipped out a back entrance into an alley. "Misdirection," Naruto said simply. "A shinobi's first and last resort." He looked down at the pile of clothes they had managed to purchase. "This world is complicated. You have no idea," Kira agreed, a genuine smile on her face. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't just a teammate or a handler. She was in on a secret, a partner in his quiet, personal war to remain anonymous. And she found that she liked the feeling very much. In the cold, sterile darkness of his island fortress, Mesogog watched the footage on a holographic screen. It was grainy, pulled from a mall security camera, but it was clear enough. It showed the blonde man and the yellow ranger. It showed the reporter's approach. And it showed the moment the man seemed to do nothing, yet completely divert the reporter's attention. Elsa stood at attention beside him. Her posture rigid. "He is clever," Mesogog rasped, his dinosaur-like voice a low growl of processors and reptilian rage. "He hides in plain sight. He has integrated himself with the Power Rangers. Dr. Oliver is sheltering him. He is a variable we did not anticipate, Master," Elsa said, her voice smooth and cold as ice. "His power signatures are unlike anything in the grid's database." "He is more than a power signature," Mesogog countered, turning his reptilian head to fix his glowing yellow eyes on her. "He is a warrior. The Geofractor was designed to neutralize any energy-based threat. He defeated it with skill and physical force. He thinks on a level these teenage rangers cannot." He fell silent for a moment, the only sound the hum of his fortress's machinery. "Your last mission was a failure, Elsa," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "This time, you will not fail. Your new directive is simple. Get close to him, not as Elsa, the general, but as the principal of Reefside High. He is an unknown. Uncover his history. Discover his weaknesses. Use whatever means are necessary. Seduction, manipulation. Deceive him. Break him. Learn what he fears. I want to know what makes this sage bleed." "Yes, Master," Elsa said, bowing her head. "I will not fail you." But as she turned to leave, a flicker of something she could not name, doubt, perhaps, or a strange, unwilling curiosity, crossed her mind. She thought of the power she had felt, even from a distance. The power that had not just destroyed her monster, but had completely rewritten the rules of the game. This Naruto Uzumaki was a threat, yes. But he was also the most interesting thing to happen to this planet in 65 million years. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. Whispers of the Past. The forest behind Tommy Oliver's home had become Naruto's sanctuary, a quiet temple where he could attempt to make sense of the chaotic new symphony of his existence. The natural energy of this world was a wild, untamed thing. But here, away from the concrete and steel of the city, it was purer. He would sit for hours in the lotus position, not on the ground, but balanced on the highest branch of a giant redwood. The world spread out beneath him like a map. It was in this state of deep meditation, of communion with the life force of the planet, that he first felt it. It was not the structured, orderly hum of the morphing grid, nor was it the raw, vibrant thrum of natural energy. This was something else entirely, a flicker at the very edge of his sage senses, so faint it was like trying to hear a single falling leaf in the midst of a hurricane. It was a ghost, an echo, a whisper of a song he hadn't heard since he'd lost his world. It was chakra. The sensation was so jarring, so fundamentally impossible, that it shattered his meditative state. His eyes snapped open, the world rushing back into sharp, painful focus. He leapt from the branch, landing silently on the forest floor. His entire being focused on that single, tenuous thread. It was weak, twisted, and tinged with a bitterness he couldn't identify, but it was undeniably the refined, personal energy of a shinobi. 1,000 impossible scenarios crashed through his mind. Had someone else survived? Had they followed him? Or was this a trap, a cruel trick of this new reality designed to prey on his deepest hopes? Hope, he discovered, was a more dangerous foe than any Otsutsuki. It was insidious, and he had no defense against it. He made a decision in the span of a single, drawn-out breath. He would not tell the others. This was a thread from his own tapestry, a ghost from his past. To involve the Rangers would be to invite questions he couldn't answer, to expose a part of himself he kept locked away in the deepest, most shadowed corner of his soul. This was a shinobi's mission. He would undertake it alone. As night fell, cloaking Reefside in a blanket of darkness and artificial light, Naruto slipped from the house. He wore the simple, dark clothing they had procured for him, a silent shadow against the deeper shadows of the night. He didn't need a map. The faint, pulsing signature of the alien Kra was a lighthouse beacon to his senses, drawing him towards the industrial outskirts of the city. The trail led him to a place that radiated an energy all its own, a sprawling, high-tech research and development campus. A single, gleaming silver sign near the heavily guarded front gate read, Mercer Biogenics, a subsidiary of Mercer Industries. The entire facility was a fortress of modern security. High fences topped with razor wire, motion-activated spotlights, and patrols of grim-faced guards. But beneath the visible deterrence, Naruto could feel a far more sophisticated network. Pressure plates buried in the earth. Microwave emitters that would boil a man from the inside out. Bio-signature scanners woven into the very air. It was formidable. It was also, to him, completely irrelevant. He found a spot in the dense woods bordering the property and settled into the darkness to observe. Patience was a virtue he had learned through blood and pain. He watched the patrol routes, memorized the timing of the camera sweeps, felt the subtle ebb and flow of the facility's electronic heartbeat. He was preparing for a solo infiltration when his senses flared with a sudden warning. He was not the only one watching. Another presence entered his sensory range. It was silent, impossibly so. It moved with a preternatural grace that made the guards look like clumsy, stumbling children. It was a sliver of darkness, flowing through the other shadows, its approach so subtle that even his sage mode had almost missed it. And from it emanated the very chakra signature he had been tracking. He watched, his body utterly still, as the cloaked figure reached the perimeter fence. The figure did not cut the wire or climb the pole. It simply paused, and for a moment, it seemed to dissolve. Its orm became a fluttering cascade of hundreds of white, rectangular sheets of paper, which flowed through the diamond-shaped gaps in the chain-link fence like a river of moonlight. On the other side, the papers swirled together, coalescing back into a single, humanoid form. Naruto's breath caught in his throat. His heart hammered against his ribs with a force that was almost painful. Shikigami no Mai, the dance of the Shikigami. It was a technique he had seen only one person use with such impossible grace and lethality. A technique that belonged to an S-rank kunoichi from the village hidden in the rain. An angel of God, Konan. The name was a thunderclap in the silence of his mind. It couldn't be. She was gone. Part of the past. Part of the world that had been devoured. Yet, the evidence was before him. A ghost in the machine, moving with a deadly, familiar purpose. He had to be sure. He had to know. He blurred into motion, a phantom whisper that flowed over the fence and through the security grid as if it wasn't there. He was a hunter now, tracking a quarry he knew intimately. He shadowed the cloaked figure as it bypassed the facility's internal security with a terrifying, beautiful efficiency. A guard's radio was silenced by a single, perfectly aimed paper shuriken that embedded itself in the device without making a sound. A laser grid was disabled as a sheet of paper, folded into the intricate shape of a butterfly, landed on the control panel and unleashed a tiny, contained electromagnetic pulse. The figure reached its destination, a reinforced blast door leading what Naruto's senses told him was a subterranean laboratory, the very source of the strange dimensional energies Konan had apparently also detected. As the figure prepared to disable the lock, Naruto made his move. He didn't announce himself. He didn't call her name. In the world they came from, such a courtesy was an invitation to a kunai in the throat. He simply appeared, stepping out of the shadow of a large condenser unit. His presence a sudden, jarring note in the facility's sterile rhythm. The cloaked figure reacted with the instantaneous, lethal grace he expected. It didn't turn or flinch. A dozen razor-sharp paper spears erupted from its back, launching themselves at him from multiple angles. Naruto moved. He swayed left, the spears missing him by millimeters. He ducked under another volley. the wind of their passage stirring his hair. He was not just dodging. He was closing the distance, his feet making no sound on the concrete. The figure spun, its cloak flaring out. From within its sleeves, a storm of paper shuriken erupted, a white blizzard of deadly projectiles. Naruto's hands became a blur, deflecting the paper blades with the backs of his gauntleted fists. He had Arned from Tommy's spar and had Haley design simple, unpowered bracers for him. A few nicked his clothes, but none found their mark. He was inside her guard now. He reached not for a weapon, but for the hood of her cloak. She was too fast. She dissolved again, her body becoming a vortex of swirling paper that engulfed him. It was a disorienting, blinding assault, each sheet of paper as sharp as a razor's edge. This was her signature defense. The one that had made her infamous. But he knew its weakness. He slammed his palm onto the ground. Futon. Datapa. Wind style. Great breakthrough. It wasn't a massive, destructive gale. It was a controlled, focused burst of wind that erupted upwards from his palm, creating a powerful updraft. It was just enough to disrupt the delicate chakra count. All she needed to maintain her dispersed form. The paper vortex faltered for a critical half-second. It was all the time he needed. He shot through the gap in her defense, his hand closing around a single, solid piece of her arm. He pulled, and the rest of the paper swirled back, solidifying into her cloaked form. His other hand shot out, grabbing the edge of her hood and mask, and pulled. The cloak and a simple white mask fell away. It was her. Her face was harder than he remembered, etched with lines of weariness and grief that hadn't been there before. Her amber eyes, usually so calm and serene, were wide with shock and a fierce, cornered animal hostility. Her blue hair was pinned back, practical and severe. She was older, leaner, a weapon honed to its finest edge by hardships he couldn't imagine. Conan, he breathed, the name feeling like a sacred, forgotten prayer on his lips. Her response was not relief. It was not recognition. It was pure, unadulterated combat instinct. Her free hand, now holding a perfectly formed paper blade, slashed at his throat. He was forced to release her and leap back, a thin red line appearing on his neck where the blade had almost found its mark. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice a low, dangerous rasp. "How do you know that name?" Naruto stared at her, his mind reeling. She didn't recognize him. Of course she didn't. He was older, his face harder. The youthful exuberance long since burned away by war and loss. And his chakra, without Kurama, his signature must feel fundamentally different to her. "It's me, Conan," he said, his voice pleading. "It's Naruto." Her eyes narrowed, searching his face. A flicker of doubt, of dawning, impossible recognition, warred with years of ingrained paranoia. "Naruto is dead," she stated, her voice flat. "I felt it. The world, the chakra of the entire world, vanished." "It didn't vanish," he said, taking a slow, non-threatening step forward. "It was torn away. I was torn away, just like you." Her stance didn't relax. "Prove it." It was a challenge, a demand. He held up his right hand, palm open. With a surge of concentration, he formed it. The spiraling sphere of pure, blue chakra, the signature jutsu that had been his trademark, his legacy. The Rasengan. Her eyes widened. Her paper blade wavered. Only one person in the world could form that jutsu with such effortless perfection. Doubt gave way to a staggering, world-altering realization. It can't be," she whispered, the blade dissolving back into a simple sheet of paper that fluttered from her nerveless fingers. Her cold, warrior's facade finally cracked, revealing the lost, grieving woman beneath. "I saw Yahiko and Nagato," Naruto said softly, the words a key to a lock he knew only she possessed. "I saw their dream. I promised Nagato I would carry it on. That was it. The final proof." A tear, a single, crystalline drop of grief, traced a path down her cheek. The tension drained from her body, replaced by a profound, soul-deep weariness that mirrored his own. "How?" was all she could manage. "I don't know," he admitted honestly. "One moment, I was ending the war. The next, I was waking up in a forest in this place. I was investigating an old Otsutsuki ruin," she explained, her voice gaining a bit of its strength back. "There was residual technology, a space-time anomaly. It activated. I was pulled through." She looked around at the sterile, high-tech facility. I've been here for 6 weeks. Surviving, hiding, trying to understand. What were you doing here? Naruto asked, gesturing to the blast door. This company, Mercer Industries. They're experimenting with the same energy that brought us here, she said, her expression turning grim. Dimensional resonance. I've been tracking their research. They're close to stabilizing a portal. I thought it might be a way home. Or at least a way to find out what happened. Before Naruto could process this new, staggering piece of information, Conan's head snapped up. Her eyes looking past him into the darkness. We're being watched. Naruto hadn't needed the warning. His sage mode had picked up the faintest of signatures the moment it appeared. A presence, cloaked and shielded by some form of advanced technology, observing them from the roof of an adjacent building. It was cold, calculating, and utterly alien. He met Conan's gaze. A silent, shinobi's understanding passed between them. Their reunion, their shared grief, would have to wait. They had company. Elsa stood on the rooftop, a pair of high-tech binoculars pressed to her eyes. Her suit's cloaking field distorted the light around her, rendering her all but invisible. Her mind was a whirlwind of calculations and revised threat assessments. It was not one anomaly. It was two. She had been tracking the strange energy readings from this facility for weeks, believing it to be a new project of Mercer's that Mesogog was not privy to. She had come tonight expecting to find a piece of technology. Instead, she found a soap opera from another dimension. She had watched the entire fight, her analytical mind breaking down their movements. Their fighting styles were completely alien, yet synergistic. They moved like two sides of the same deadly coin. They knew each other. They had a history. The target, this Naruto Uzumaki, was not just a random powerhouse who had stumbled into their world. He was a piece of a much larger, more complicated puzzle. And now, there was a second piece on the board. A woman with terrifyingly precise and versatile abilities. Mesogog had to know. This changed everything. She lowered her binoculars as the two figures below seemed to melt back into the shadows, their mission aborted. She didn't try to follow. Her objective was complete. She had gathered the intelligence. The weakness Mesogog had sought might not be a fear or a past trauma. It might just be a woman with blue hair and the power to command paper. As she turned to leave, a new directive formed in her mind. She needed to know everything about these two. Not just to destroy them, but to understand the power they wielded. A power that felt ancient, powerful, and perhaps, liberating. Down below, in the alleyways of Reefside's industrial sector, Naruto and Conan stopped. They're gone, Naruto confirmed. That was not one of your rangers, Conan stated, her voice laced with suspicion. No, Naruto agreed. That was one of the enemy. Which means this place is more important than either of us realized. He looked at her, at this impossible, welcome ghost from his past. She was alone, hunted, just as he was. Don't go back into the shadows, Conan. Come with me. I have a base. Allies. They're loud and inexperienced, but their hearts are in the right place. We can be safe there. We can figure this out together. Conan looked at this man who wore the face of the boy she remembered, but carried the weight of a world on his shoulders. In his eyes, she saw the same profound loneliness that had been her constant companion for 6 agonizing weeks. He was offering her sanctuary. But more than that, he was offering her a connection. A link to the home she would never see again. Her logical, shinobi mind screamed at her. It was a trap. He could be a clone, a trick, a pawn. But her heart, the part of her that had died with Yahiko and Nagato, ached with a desperate need to believe. Where are we going? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. It was the only surrender she was willing to give. Home, Naruto replied, the word tasting strange and foreign on his tongue. He wasn't sure if he was lying or telling a new, unexpected truth. But as he led the last surviving member of the original Akatsuki through the sleeping city, he felt it for the first time since he had arrived, the faintest, most fragile flicker of hope. He was no longer the last. They were two, and in a world of strangers, that was enough to start a revolution. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Serpent and the Angel. The return to the Oliver residence was a silent, tension-fraught journey through the sleeping suburbs of Reefside. Naruto moved with the fluid grace of a creature in its natural habitat. But Conan was something else entirely. She was a wraith, a sliver of darkness that didn't seem to touch the ground, her every movement a testament to a lifetime of stealth and infiltration that made even Naruto feel loud. They were two ghosts haunting a world that had no graves for their dead. As they approached the concealed entrance to the Dino lab, a hidden passage behind a waterfall in the garden, Naruto paused. He met Conan's amber eyes in the dim moonlight. A silent question passed between them. "Are you ready for this?" Her expression was a mask of stoic indifference, but he could feel the coiled tension in her chakra. The wariness of a wild animal being led towards a cage. She gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Naruto placed his hand on the scanner panel, but instead of using his own registered biometrics, he deliberately sent a minute-coded pulse of chakra into the system, a pre-arranged signal with Tommy for a non-hostile and scheduled guest. It was the shinobi UI valent of knocking politely before kicking the door down. The waterfall ceased its flow, revealing the gleaming steel door, which slid open with a heavy hiss. Light from the lab spilled out, framing the imposing silhouette of Tommy Oliver. He stood with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Behind him, the three Dino Rangers were assembled, already morphed into their armored forms. They had been waiting. They were ready for a fight. The atmosphere inside the lab was colder than the night air outside. The whirring of Haley's servers and the hum of the command console were the only sounds in a silence thick with suspicion. Connor, in his Red Ranger armor, took a half-step forward, his posture aggressive. "Naruto, who's your friend?" The word, friend, was laced with a thick, dripping sarcasm. "This is Conan," Naruto said, his voice calm and even, a rock in a churning sea of distrust. He stepped aside, not to expose her, but to present her as his equal. "She is like me, a survivor from our world." Conan's gaze swept across the room, her analytical eyes taking in every detail. She catalogued the technology, the layout of the room, and the posture of each of the armored teenagers. Her eyes, cold and assessing, saw not heroes, but undisciplined children playing with weapons they didn't fully comprehend. "Another one." Ethan's voice crackled over his helmet's comm, a mixture of disbelief and intellectual alarm. "What are the odds of two interdimensional refugees landing in the same suburban town? Statistically, it's a virtual impossibility." "The impossible seems to be our new reality," Tommy stated, his eyes never leaving Conan. He addressed her directly, his voice leaving no room for games. "You were detected at Mercer Biogenics. An Akatsuki-level shinobi doesn't go for a midnight stroll around a high-tech research facility. State your intentions." Naruto felt a flicker of surprise. Akatsuki level. Tommy had clearly been doing his homework, cross-referencing Naruto's own limited intel with whatever databases this world possessed on myth and legend. Conan's reply was as sharp and precise as one of her paper blades. "My intentions are my own." The sheer, unapologetic defiance in her tone sent a ripple of hostility through the Rangers. Connor's hand drifted towards the Tyranno staff holstered on his back. "Wrong answer," Connor growled. "Try again." Before the situation could devolve, Naruto stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Conan. It was not a move to shield her, but a clear, unmistakable declaration. "She is with me. She is not your enemy," Naruto said, his voice dropping, losing its patient edge and gaining the hard, unyielding tone of a military commander. "She is a guest, under my protection. You will treat her with respect." "Respect," Ethan scoffed. "She's a hostile unknown who hasn't answered a single question. For all we know, she's a scout for Mesogog." "Use your head, Ethan," Naruto shot back, his gaze unwavering. "If she were with Mesogog, she would not have been infiltrating one of his own facilities. She was there for the same reason I was, to investigate a potential threat. Her methods are her own, but our goals align." He turned his attention to Tommy, man to man, warrior to warrior. "She has nowhere else to go. She is one of my people, perhaps the last of my people. She stays." This is not a request. The ultimatum hung in the air, heavy and absolute. In that moment, Naruto wasn't the team's mysterious ally or Tommy's ward. He was the Sage Dragon Ranger, a sovereign power, making a declaration of intent. He was drawing a line in the sand, and the entire Dino Thunder team was on the other side. Tommy Oliver held his gaze for a long, tense moment. He was a leader, and his first instinct was to reject any challenge to his authority. But he was also a pragmatist. He saw the unwavering resolve in Naruto's eyes. He saw the power coiled in Naruto's frame, ready to be unleashed. He saw the cold, deadly competence in the woman beside him. And he saw the undeniable logic of Naruto's argument. Pushing this would mean losing Naruto, and potentially making an enemy of two S-class warriors. It was a battle he couldn't win and couldn't afford to fight. All right, Tommy conceded, the word costing him a visible effort. He held up a hand to forestall the Ranger's protests. She can stay. For now. He then fixed Conan with a gaze as hard as diamond. But there are rules. You are a guest. You will not have access to the core systems. You will not leave this property without my knowledge and consent. And you will be supervised at all times. Am I clear? Conan's amber eyes flickered towards Naruto, a silent communication passing between them. He gave a subtle nod. She then turned back to Tommy. Crystal, she replied, her voice devoid of emotion. The immediate crisis was averted, but the tension remained, a low-grade poison in the air. The Rangers powered down their suits, their faces a mixture of resentment and confusion. Connor looked openly mutinous. This was their base, their sanctuary, and now it had two outsiders in it, one of whom refused to even acknowledge their authority. Their new, fragile alliance had just sustained its first, and perhaps deepest, crack. The hours that followed were a masterclass in awkward, simmering hostility. Conan was given a spare room, Spartan and functional, which she accepted without comment. She moved with a quiet, unobtrusive grace, a phantom in the bustling heart of their operations, yet her very presence was a disruption. The Rangers, particularly Connor and Ethan, treated her like an unexploded bomb, speaking in hushed tones when she was near and watching her every move. It was Haley who made the first real attempt to bridge the chasm. She found Conan in the lab's small, sterile lounge area. Conan was sitting at a table, a single, plain white sheet of paper in her hands. She wasn't doing anything with it, just holding it, her expression distant and unreadable. Haley, never one for social niceties when intellectual curiosity was at stake, walked right up and sat down opposite her, placing a tablet on the table. I've been running simulations based on the data from the facility's security logs, she began, her voice a rapid-fire burst of enthusiasm. Your Shikigami no Mai technique. It's not just chakra-infused paper. That's too simple. You're altering its state of matter on a quantum level, aren't you? Shifting it between a quasi-solid and a semi-particulate state. But what's the command medium? Is it a mental interface? Or do you encode instructions into the chakra itself, like a biological programming language? Conan looked up, her amber eyes showing the first flicker of genuine interest since she had arrived. The others had questioned her motives, her allegiance, her past. This woman was asking about her art. She saw Conan not as a threat, but as a miracle of science. The chakra is the medium, Conan replied, her voice quiet but clear. Every sheet of paper is an extension of my will. The folding is a focus, but the true transformation happens at a conceptual level. Haley leaned forward, her eyes bright with understanding. Conceptual, yes. So you're not just commanding it to be a spear, you're imposing the concept of spear onto the paper's energetic matrix. That's beautiful. She started scribbling equations on her tablet. The potential applications are limitless. Self-assembling structures, programmable matter. Do you have any idea what you could do for materials science? For the first time, a small, almost imperceptible smile touched Conan's lips. I have primarily used it to kill people. The blunt, honest statement would have horrified anyone else. Haley just nodded, her focus still on her tablet. Of course, the most direct application of a new technology is always weaponization. It's a sad but predictable aspect of sentient development. But think of the possibilities. In that moment, an unlikely bond was forged. Not of friendship, but of mutual, high-level intellectual respect. Haley had seen the angel not as a warrior, but as a genius. And for Conan, who had only ever been seen as a tool or a monster, it was a profound and disarming experience. Kira's approach was different. She found Conan later in the cavernous training area, a vast pace that could simulate any environment. Conan stood in the center of the empty, Gray room, a storm of paper swirling around her in a silent, deadly ballet. Spears, shuriken, animals, a lion of folded paper roared silently as it leapt through the air, dissolving into a flock of birds that then coalesced into a giant, protective wall. It was breathtaking, an art form of lethal grace. Kira didn't speak. She knew words would be useless. Instead, she leaned against the wall, took out her electric guitar, and began to play. She didn't plug it in. The clean, unamplified notes were a quiet counterpoint to the silent dance of the paper. She played a melody that had been haunting her for days, a piece that was melancholic, questioning, and tinged with a strange, fierce hope. It was the song of the man with the sad blue eyes. The song of a world turned upside down. Conan's movements didn't stop, but they changed. The aggressive, militaristic forms softened. The paper storm became less a weapon and more an expression. A giant, delicate paper lily bloomed in the center of the room. The movements of the paper began to flow in time with the gentle, searching notes of Kira's guitar. They stayed like that for nearly an hour. A kunoichi and a rock star, speaking a language that had no words. Art was their common ground. For Kira, she saw in Conan's deadly art a reflection of her own music, a why to turn pain and chaos into something beautiful and powerful. For Conan, she heard in Kira's music an echo of the rain, a sad but beautiful sound that reminded her of the home she had lost, and the two boys she had loved. When Kira finally lowered her guitar, the last paper bird had settled gently on Conan's shoulder. "He misses his home," Kira said softly. It wasn't a question. "We both do," Conan replied, her gaze distant. An understanding had been reached. Kira was not a threat. She was a kindred spirit. Naruto knew he had to talk to her. Really talk. He found her where he knew she would be, in the forest. Under the light of the moon that was so much like their own, yet fundamentally different. She was standing by a small, gurgling creek, her back to him. He walked up beside her, the silence between them comfortable, familiar. They were two shinobi, used to the quiet companionship of a shared watch. "This world is so loud," she said, her first words in 10 minutes. "Even the silence is filled with noise. The electricity in the air, the rumble of distant machines." "I know," Naruto said. "I can feel it all. In sage mode, it's a constant roar." They fell silent again, listening to the creak and the chirping of alien insects. "I never thought I'd see a friendly face again," Conan whispered, her voice so low it was almost lost in the night sounds. "When I came through, I thought I was in hell. A clean, well-lit, and terribly polite hell." Naruto allowed himself a small, sad smile. "That's a good way to describe it." He looked at her, his expression turning serious. "Conan, what happened? After my fight with Nagato." Conan closed her eyes, the memory of fresh pain. "I took his body, and Yahiko's, back to Omegakure. To build a shrine, to protect his dream. I left the Akatsuki. I told them that you were the new bridge to peace." She took a shaky breath. Then Obito came for Nagato's eyes. For the Rinnegan. Naruto's hands clenched into fists. "Did he? We fought," she said, her voice turning hard as steel. "I was prepared. I turned the entire lake into a sea of 600 billion explosive paper tags. Enough to kill him 10 minutes over. But his ability to phase through reality, he survived. Her voice broke for a fraction of a second. "He defeated me. And then, the world ended." They stood in the heavy silence, the weight of their shared history, their shared losses, pressing down on them. "Jiraiya-sensei," Naruto began, his own voice thick with emotion. "He spoke of you three. The students he found in the rain. He never gave up on you. Even at the end, he believed in the choice he made to train you." A single tear traced a path down Conan's cheek. She didn't wipe it away. "He was a good man. A fool, but a good man. We were fools to think we could create peace through pain." She finally turned to look at him, her amber eyes searching his. "You did it, though, didn't you? You ended the war. You brought peace." "For a time," Naruto said, his voice heavy. "We won. We built a new world from the ashes. We were happy." He looked up at the moon. "And then a new enemy came. Stronger. From beyond the stars. And everything we built, it all turned to dust. In the end, I saved nothing. You saved me," Conan said softly. The simple word struck him with the force of a physical blow. He looked at her, at this woman who was the last living link to his master. To one of his greatest enemies, to his past. She was a relic, a ghost, just like him. But she was real, she was here. We're all that's left, he said, the finality of it settling over them both. The last two shinobi of a dead world. Then we will have to be enough, Conan replied, her voice filled with a quiet, unyielding strength that Naruto hadn't heard since the last time he'd spoken to the Godime Hokage. In that moment, she was not just an Akatsuki member or a refugee. She was a cage of her own fallen village, a queen without a kingdom. And Naruto, for the first time since he'd arrived, felt the crushing weight of his solitude lift, just a little. He was not alone. To establish a cover, Tommy had insisted Naruto create a civilian identity. It was a classic ranger tactic. Hiding in plain sight, using his apparent age, the simplest solution was to enroll him as a transfer student at Reefside High. It would allow him to keep an eye on the other rangers and provide a plausible reason for his presence in town. Naruto found the idea of returning to a classroom absurd, but he understood the strategic necessity. Which was why he now found himself standing in the sterile, overly air-conditioned office of the school's principal. A nameplate on the large, mahogany desk read, Principal Randall. The door opened, and she walked in. She was tall, impeccably dressed in a sharp, professional black suit, with her dark hair pulled back in a severe, no-nonsense bun. She moved with a brisk, efficient confidence, and her eyes, when they met his, were a startlingly intelligent, piercing shade of brown. "Mr. Uzumaki, I presume," she said, her voice a smooth, cultured alto. She offered a hand, her handshake firm and cool. "I'm Principal Randall. I have your transfer application here. It's sparse." Naruto had scanned the forged documents Haley had created. They were masterful, but intentionally vague, listing a non-existent, private homeschooling program, in a remote part of Canada. "My previous education was unconventional," Naruto said, his voice calm and polite. He watched her, his sage senses on a low, passive alert. There was something about her. An intensity, a level of focus that was far beyond that of a normal high school principal. Her energy signature was blank, shielded, an artificial calm that felt more like a fortress wall than a peaceful pond. "I see," Principal Randall said, sitting down behind her desk and steepling her fingers. She fixed him with a look that was both charmingly welcoming and intensely scrutinizing. "It says here you have no family contacts listed. An orphan." The question was direct, a scalpel seeking a weak point. "My family is gone," Naruto replied, his expression unreadable. "My condolences," she said. Though her tone held no actual sympathy, it was a perfunctory social grace. Reefside can be a difficult place for an outsider. But at our school, we pride ourselves on discipline and structure. We find it helps channel the more chaotic energies of our students. The way she said, chaotic energies, sent a faint warning bell through Naruto's mind. It was a strange choice of words. "I adapt quickly," Naruto assured her. "I have no doubt," she said, a small, knowing smile on her lips that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You have a certain self-possession about you. It's rare in a young man. It suggests you've seen a great deal." She was probing, fishing, her polite questions laden with hooks. Naruto met her gaze directly. "I have." The chess match continued for another 10 minutes. She asked about his academic interests, his career goals, his reasons for choosing Reefside. Her questions were a carefully constructed web, designed to catch him in a lie, to find a crack in his facade. He, in turn, answered with carefully crafted half-truths, his responses a shield of polite, impenetrable vagueness. It was a battle of wills between two masters of deception, conducted over the sterile landscape of school enrollment forms. He knew she was more than she appeared. And she, Elsa, knew that the boy in front of her was the warrior Mesogogue wanted broken. But as she watched him, as she met his unwavering, ancient eyes, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't anticipated: respect. He was not some arrogant, super-powered teenager. He was an old soul, a warrior encased in the body of a young man. He was, she realized with a strange, unsettling thrill, a worthy opponent. "Well, Mr. Uzumaki," she said finally, stamping his form with an aggressive finality. Welcome to Reefside High. I have a feeling you will make quite an impact. I hope not, Naruto replied honestly, standing to leave. I prefer a quiet life. As he walked out of the office, the polite smile on Elsa's face vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating expression. The game had begun, and she was already planning her next move. That evening, the Dino lab was quiet. The Rangers were out, dealing with their actual lives. Haley was engrossed in a new schematic, occasionally muttering about conceptual energy matrices. Naruto stood with Conan, observing the main console, where a map of the world was displayed. 6 weeks here, and I still can't believe it, Conan said quietly. A whole world, living in peace. No hidden villages, no child soldiers. They fight their battles with these chosen champions. It's so inefficient, so naive. It's not our world, Naruto said. Their peace is theirs to defend. We're just passing through. But even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. He had the Draconite gem. Conan had her own mysterious purpose. They weren't just passing through. They were a part of this world now, for better or for worse. The arrival of the angel had irrevocably altered the board, adding a new, powerful, and unpredictable piece to the game. And as Naruto looked at the last remnant of his past, he knew that their shared future, whatever it held, would be forged in the fire of this strange new war. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The enemy of my enemy. The truth, Naruto had learned long ago, was a blade with 2 edges. It could cut through lies and deception, but it could also sever the bonds of trust if wielded carelessly. He and Conan now held such a blade. The knowledge that Anton Mercer, the human host of their monstrous enemy Mesogog, was actively researching a cure, a potential NT. Oh, the war that hinged on the salvation of their greatest foe. They stood before the Dino Lab's primary console, a holographic map of Reefside's energy grid casting a cool blue light on their serious faces. For 2 days, they had kept their discovery a secret, a heavy silence between them that was both a bond and a burden. Conan, ever the pragmatist, had argued for immediate action. The data is incomplete, she stated, her voice a low, clinical murmur as she cross-referenced the information they had gathered with Haley's energy readings. Mercer's research is theoretical. He lacks a stable CA talist to safely separate the 2 entities. But the core principles are sound. This is a weapon. It's a cure, Naruto countered, his gaze fixed on the glowing headquarters of Mercer Industries. A weapon destroys. This could save a life. Quote, Anton Mercer's life is not our concern, Conan said, her amber eyes turning to him, hard and unyielding. Mesogog is our concern. This research is the key to his only vulnerability. To see it as anything else is a sentiment we cannot afford. This was the core of their disagreement. Conan saw a tactical objective. Naruto, who had built his entire life on he principle of saving everyone he could, saw a man trapped in a cage of his own making. To him, ignoring Mercer's plight was to become no better than the enemies he had fought and defeated in his own world. Their quiet debate was interrupted by the arrival of Tommy and the other Rangers, fresh from a morning training session. Anything? Tommy asked, grabbing a towel to wipe the sweat from his brow. Naruto shared a look with Conan. It was time to reveal a part of the truth. Conan's initial assessment was correct, Naruto began, turning to face the team. Mercer Industries is conducting high-level research into dimensional energy. The signature matches the one that brought us here. So Mercer is trying to open a portal for Mesogog? Connor asked, his hand clenching into a fist. Bring in reinforcements. It's a logical assumption, Naruto said, carefully choosing his words. But we don't have enough data to be certain of his motives. The facility's internal servers are shielded by a quantum encryption network. We were unable to breach it on our initial reconnaissance. It was a lie of omission, clean and simple. Then we go in hard, Connor declared. The 5 of us, plus you 2. A full frontal assault. We trash the lab and smash his portal machine before he can use it. A frontal assault on a public figure like Anton Mercer would be a political disaster, Tommy said, shaking his head. He'd brand us as terrorists. We'd lose all public support. We need concrete proof of his connection to Mesogog. Proof is on those servers, Naruto stated. But we can't get it with a sledgehammer. We need a scalpel. A 2-person team, In and out before they even know we're there. No alarms, no witnesses. You mean you and Conan? Ethan deduced, his eyes narrowing. Why not us? We're the Power Rangers. This is our job. Quote, your job is to fight monsters and protect the city, Naruto replied, his tone patient but firm. This is not a battle. This is an infiltration. It requires a skill set you do not possess. You are powerful, but you are also loud. In the world Conan and I come from, this is what we were trained to do since we could walk. It is our art. The unvarnished truth of his statement silenced them. They had seen his skill, and they had seen Conan's. They knew he was right, but the implication that they were being benched, that they were unfit for the mission, stung their pride. Tommy, however, understood the strategic reality. He's right, he said, much to the Rangers' dismay. This needs to be clean. A ghost mission. He looked at Naruto, a silent warning in his eyes. You get the data, nothing else. No engaging, no collateral damage. You find out what Mercer is planning, and you get out. Understood. Understood. Naruto lied, knowing their true missio. N was far more complicated than simple data retrieval. They weren't just going to find out what Mercer was planning. They were going to steal his hope of a cure, right from under the nose of his inner demon. Night fell, and the Mercer Biogenics campus became a fortress of light and shadow. Inside, in the deepest subterranean level, Anton Mercer stared at a sequence of glowing genetic code on a holographic screen. A look of desperate hope on his haggard face. The lab was his sanctuary and his prison, the only place he could work on a cure for the monster that was slowly consuming his life. He didn't know that two phantoms were already inside his fortress. Naruto and Conan moved through the ventilation shafts, their synergy a product of a shared lifetime of training in the art of silent war. Naruto led, his sage mode a living, breathing schematic of the entire building. He could feel the vibrations of the guards' footsteps 2 floors above, the subtle hum of the active security sensors, the faint, panicked heartbeat of Anton Mercer in the lab below. He was their eyes and ears. Conan was the key. When they reached a laser grid, she didn't disable it. She released a single, perfectly folded paper moth. It fluttered down, its wings dusted with chakra-infused particles that absorbed and refracted light. The moth passed through the laser grid, and for the 5 seconds it took to cross, the beams were rendered completely invisible and inert. They slipped through the gap, and the moth dissolved into dust on the other side. When they encountered a sonic scanner, Conan pressed her hand to the wall of the vent. A wave of paper flowed from her palm, coating the interior of the shaft in a thin, layered sheet. It created a perfect anechoic chamber, absorbing the scanner's pulse and eating back a looped recording of silence. They were ghosts, untraceable, unseen. They dropped into a darkened maintenance corridor adjacent to the primary lab. Through a one-way observation window, they saw him. Anton Mercer, looking weary and desperate, his entire being focused on the complex equations floating in the air before him. He's alone, Naruto whispered, his voice a bare breath of sound. The data is on that central server, Conan noted, pointing to a pulsating column of light in the center of the lab. The encryption is quantum. I can't hack it, but I can create a bypass. I'll need to physically interface with it. I'll need exactly 3 minutes. You'll get them, Naruto promised. I'll be your shadow. Conan dissolved into a river of paper, flowing under the lab door. Naruto followed, using a flicker technique that moved him between the ticks of the security camera's shutter, a blur of motion too fast for any machine to register. Inside the lab, the air was cold and smelled of ozone and antiseptic. Mercer was so engrossed in his work he didn't notice the 2 silent figures who had just entered his sanctum. Conan coalesced behind the central server, pressing her palms against its surface. Thin, shimmering lines of chakra-infused paper, finer than hair, flowed from her fingertips, sinking into the seams of the machine. She was not hacking the code, she was building a physical bridge through the quantum tumblers, a shinobi's answer to a digital problem. Naruto stood guard, his senses expanded, feeling the entire facility. And that's when he felt it. A new presence. It was on the roof of the building, and it was descending, fast and silent. The energy signature was cold, artificial, and sickeningly familiar. It was the same one they had felt before. The Watcher. Conan. We have company. He sub-vocalized, the shinobi technique requiring no sound. 1 minute. I need 2. She sent back, her concentration absolute. The presence entered the building through the roof access. It was bypassing the security systems with a frightening ease, using what Naruto recognized as high-level access codes. It wasn't breaking in. It had a key. It's one of them, Naruto realized. One of Mesogog's generals. Then our objective has changed, Conan replied, a hard edge to her thoughts. Data retrieval and target elimination. No, Naruto sent back, his eyes narrowing. This is an opportunity. Keep working. The doors to the laboratory hissed open. Elsa strode in, her black suit immaculate, her expression a mask of cold authority. She did not look surprised to see them. She had clearly been tracking them. Her eyes, however, were not on Conan, who was hidden behind the server. They were locked on Naruto. Anton Mercer spun around, his face pale with shock and fear. Elsa, what are you doing here? This is my private lab. You are not authorized. Mesogog's authority supersedes your own, Anton, Elsa said, her voice dripping with contempt. He grows impatient with your little side projects. He sent me to see what secrets you've been keeping from him. Her gaze flickered past Mercer, settling on Naruto. And it seems you've attracted some vermin. They are not my guests, Mercer stammered. Backing away. I know, Elsa said, a cruel smile touching her lips. She looked directly at Naruto. You, the anomaly. Mesogog is very interested in you. He wants to know what makes you tick. What you fear. What you love. From behind the server, 1,000 paper shuriken erupted, a white storm that converged on Elsa from all sides. Let's show her what we are. Conan's thought echoed in Naruto's mind. Elsa reacted with impossible speed. A shimmering purple energy field materialized around her, deflecting the paper storm. The shuriken clattered uselessly to the floor. Crude, she sniffed, but effective, I suppose, against lesser opponents. Naruto moved. He didn't attack her. He moved to stand between her and the terrified Anton Mercer. Your fight is with me, he said, his voice calm. Is it? Elsa tilted her head, her eyes gleaming with a predatory intelligence. I don't think so. I'm here to test you. To see what you're truly made of. Let's add a variable. She raised her hand, and a blast of purple energy shot not at Naruto, but at the main control console for the lab's containment system. The console exploded in a shower of sparks. Alarms blared to life. A deep, guttural roar echoed from a heavily shielded containment cell at the far end of the lab. What have you done? Mercer screamed, his face a mask of terror. That's an unstable biomass. A failed experiment. Yes, Elsa said with a wicked grin. Mesogog believes in recycling. Let's see how our hero handles a crisis. The reinforced door to the containment cell began to buckle inwards. Conan had the data. A small, crystalline drive was in her hand. Naruto. We have it. We have to go. Go. Naruto yelled, this time out loud. Get him out of here. He pointed to Mercer. Conan didn't hesitate. She knew the calculus of a mission. A vortex of paper engulfed the protesting Anton Mercer, lifting him off his feet and pulling him towards the ventilation shaft. This isn't over, anomaly. Elsa called, a blast of energy from her hand forcing Naruto to dodge. No, Naruto agreed, his eyes glowing with a faint, golden light as he activated his sage mode. It's just beginning. The containment door burst from its hinges. A creature of pure nightmare shambled out. It was a writhing mass of green and black goo, studded with mismatched eyes and snapping jaws, a biological catastrophe that radiated an aura of raw, uncontrolled mutation. The creature roared and lunged, not at Naruto, but at Elsa, the one who had freed it. The three-way battle was a whirlwind of chaos. Naruto moved with a liquid grace. His objective not to destroy, but to control. He used precise blasts of wind to herd the creature, to keep its corrosive slime away from the delicate servers. He wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to manage. Elsa fought with a cold, ruthless efficiency, her energy blasts tearing chunks from the biomass, which immediately regenerated. She was powerful, but her focus was divided. She was constantly analyzing Naruto's movements, his techniques, his reactions. It was during a moment when they were both forced back by a wave of acidic slime that Naruto spoke, his voice cutting through the chaos of the battle. He'll kill you, you know, he said, his tone conversational. Elsa fired a blast past his head. Don't bother with the psychological games. They won't work on me. It's not a game, Naruto said, easily sidestepping a lashing tentacle. It's a fact. A creature like Mesogog, obsessed with perfection and control, he can't tolerate loose ends. The moment your usefulness expires, or the moment he perceives you as a threat, you'll end up just like that thing. He nodded towards the biomass. A failed experiment, locked in a cage. He could feel it, a flicker of fear behind her cold facade. A spike of adrenaline that had nothing to do with the fight. He had struck a nerve. I am loyal to Master Mesogog, she stated, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. You're loyal to survival, Naruto corrected, and you're smart enough to know that your survival and his are not linked. He sees you as a tool, a disposable asset. He parried a blow from the monster, then looked directly at her. Anton Mercer's research, it's not just a threat to Mesogog. It's a key to freedom, for him, and for you. Lies, she snarled, but the attack she launched was unfocused. A sign of her inner turmoil. The battle climaxed as Naruto, seeing his opening, formed a Rasengan. He didn't aim it at Elsa or the monster. He slammed it into the ceiling directly above the biomass. The ceiling cracked, and the sprinkler system, filled with a chemical fire suppressant, rained down. The chemicals reacted violently with the biomass, causing it to hiss and dissolve into a foul-smelling puddle. In the confusion of the chemical spray and the blaring alarms, Naruto moved. He had 2 data drives in his pocket. One, from Conan, contained the complete, uncorrupted research from Mercer. The other was a decoy he had prepared, a copy containing only the theoretical, and most dangerous, aspects of the research, subtly altered to seem like Mercer was developing a weapon to usurp Mesogog. He saw Elsa recovering, her eyes searching for him in the smoky chaos. He deliberately fumbled, letting the decoy drive slip from his fingers onto the floor. It clattered near her feet. He then threw a smoke pellet, a relic from his own world, and vanished. Elsa stared at the drive. She saw Naruto's mistake. It was too easy. A trap, or the arrogance of a man who thought he had won. Her orders were to discover his weakness. But he had just offered her a strength. A potential weapon against Mercer, a way to solidify her position with Mesogog. She snatched the drive from the floor. This was intelligence. This was a victory. She turned and fled, the alarms of the approaching security teams echoing behind her. Naruto reconvened with Conan and a terrified Anton Mercer in a darkened alley several blocks away. You let her go, Conan stated, her tone accusatory. You could have neutralized her. Neutralizing her wasn't the mission, Naruto replied, helping Mercer to his feet. She has what I wanted her to have. A story, a lie wrapped around a truth that will fester in Mesogog's mind. Today, we didn't just steal data. We planted a virus, the most powerful virus of all, doubt. Mercer stared at him, his mind reeling. You saved me. But you stole my research. Why? Your research is too dangerous to be left in your lab, Naruto said, handing him a simple, untraceable communication device. But your work is not finished. We will be in touch. We have a common enemy, Drive. Mercer. And the enemy of my enemy is a potential ally. He and Conan vanished into the night, leaving the bewildered scientist alone with an impossible choice. Back in the Dino lab, they stood once again before the console, the true data drive in Naruto's hand. Are we going to tell them? Conan asked. The truth. About Mercer. About what you did. Naruto looked at the drive, then at the sleeping city on the monitor. Tommy and the Rangers saw the world in black and white. Good versus evil. To them, Mesogog was a monster to be destroyed, not a disease to be cured. Telling them the truth would compromise their ability to act, bog them down in a moral debate while Mesogog continued his rampage. No, Naruto said, his decision firm. They're not ready for this kind of war. This is a battle to be fought in the shadows. For now, this stays between us. Conan nodded, her loyalty to him absolute, even if she disagreed with his sentimentality. In the darkness of the lab, a new alliance was forged. Not of Rangers, but of shinobi. They had their own mission now, their own secrets. And in the silent, unending war against the monsters of the world, they would fight it their own way. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. A Symphony of Chaos. The sky did not darken with clouds. It was ripped open. One moment, Reefside was basking in the golden glow of a perfect Californian afternoon. The next, a wound appeared in the heavens directly over the city's center. It was a jagged, ugly tear in the fabric of reality, pulsing with a sickly, gangrenous green light. From this dimensional rift, there was no thunder, no roar of engines. Only a silence that was far more terrifying, as an army descended upon the unsuspecting world. It was not a random monster attack. It was an occupation. Advanced tyrannodrones, sleeker and faster than the cannon fodder the Rangers were used to, dropped from the rift like spiders on silk threads. Their movements sharp and militaristic. With them came lumbering, rhino-like biozords, their armored hides a grotesque fusion of chitin and steel, their sole purpose to smash, to demolish, to level. They landed with street-shattering force, their collective roar the first note in a symphony of chaos. Inside the Dino lab, every alarm blared at once. Red lights flashed across the consoles, painting the cavern in the color of blood. "What is that?" Connor shouted, stumbling back from the main screen, which showed a dozen different citywide camera feeds, each one a portrait of pandemonium. "It's not a monster," Tommy said, his voice grim, his eyes wide with the dawning horror of a veteran recognizing a completely new type of war. "It's an army. He's making his move. All of it." Naruto and Conan stood before a secondary console, Mercer's data crystal still humming between them. For Naruto, the invasion was not a visual on a screen. It was a physical assault. His Sage mode, connected to the life force of the city, was suddenly flooded with the collective terror of thousands of people. It was a tidal wave of panic, pain, and despair, and he staggered, clutching his head as the psychic scream threatened to overwhelm him. Conan placed a steadying hand on his shoulder, her own face a mask of cold fury. "This is what they do," she said, her voice a low whisper filled with the memory of a rain-soaked village torn apart by war. "The powerful, in their madness, crush the innocent under their heel." "He's hitting multiple targets simultaneously," Haley called out, her fingers a blur across her keyboard, her mind processing the tactical data with terrifying speed. The power grid, the communications tower downtown, and a full-scale ground assault the financial district to maximize civilian casualties and so panic. "It's a classic blitzkrieg. Rangers." Tommy's voice cut through the chaos, a commander's bark that demanded absolute attention. "This is not a containment mission. It's a full-scale defense. Connor, you take the financial district. They need your heavy-hitting power. Ethan, the power grid, your shield is our only hope of keeping the city's lights on. Kira, you're with me, we'll try to blunt the main advance. Go, now." Dino thunder, "Power up." The familiar cry echoed through the lab, but this time it held no youthful exuberance. It was the grim, determined call to arms of soldiers heading into a battle they knew they might not win. As the three Rangers teleported out in streaks of color, Naruto straightened up, forcing the psychic noise of the city into the background, compartmentalizing it. His blue eyes, now glowing with the golden sheen of Sage mode, were fixed on the tactical map Haley had projected onto the main screen. He saw not just isolated attacks, but a pattern. A strategy. "He's trying to cut the head off the snake," Naruto said. "Isolate the city, break their morale, then crush the pieces." Tommy's playing his game, responding to each threat as it appears. "Tommy's a fighter, a brilliant one," Haley said, not looking up from her work. "But he's a frontline soldier. He's not a general. He's CA&TC the whole board when he's a piece on it." "Then he needs a strategist," Naruto stated. He turned to Conan, a silent understanding passing between them. Their quiet war in the shadows was over. The war was here, now, in the open. The communications tower is the city's voice. If it falls, they can't coordinate emergency services. They'll be blind and deaf. Conan nodded, her amber eyes like chips of ice. "I will not allow them to be silenced." She turned and walked towards the exit, not with haste, but with a cold, inexorable purpose. She didn't need to teleport. She would get there her own way. As she moved, sheets of paper began to flow from her sleeves, orbiting her like guardian satellites. Naruto tapped the comm link on the console, patching himself into the Ranger's private channel. His voice was calm, clear, and radiated an authority that cut through their battle-fueled adrenaline. "Kira, 2 squads of advanced drones are using the subway tunnels to flank you from the east. They'll be on your position in 40 seconds. In the chaos of a downtown street, Kira, who had just used her Terra grips to slice a Biozord's leg, spun around. What? How do you know that? I can feel them moving. Naruto's voice replied, Ethan, your position at the power plant is about to be compromised. They're not trying to destroy the generators, they're trying to overload them. Divert your Tricera shield to the primary capacitor bank. Now, a new voice, cold and precise, joined the channel. It was Conan. Communications tower is under siege by an elite unit. They are attempting to plant a viral transmitter. I am engaging. On the battlefield, the dynamic shifted. The Rangers were no longer fighting isolated battles. They were a coordinated unit, guided by an unseen hand that saw every threat, every opening, every possibility. Naruto had become the nerve center of the city's defense, his Sage Mode the ultimate battle mapping software. And with Haley holding the Technologica, L-Line and Conan waging her own one-woman war, the tide began, ever so slightly, to turn. Kira Ford was flying, not with her pterodactyl wings, but on the pure, screaming adrenaline of a battle for survival. The new drones, Raptor drones, she dubbed them, were terrifying. They were faster, smarter, and fought with a coordinated, predatory intelligence. She was pinned down behind an overturned bus, a dozen of them closing in. Their metallic claws screeching on the asphalt. She was tired. Her energy was low. She was about to be overwhelmed. Think outside the box, Kira, Naruto's voice echoed in her memory from a training session. Your greatest weapon isn't your scream. It's your creativity. She looked up. Above her loomed the glass and steel facade of the Reefside corporate tower. An idea, insane and brilliant, sparked in her mind. It wasn't about raw power. It was about the physics of the battlefield. She took a deep breath, leapt from behind the bus, and unleashed her terror scream. But she didn't aim it at the drones. She aimed it at the skyscraper. She didn't just scream. She modulated the frequency, pushing it higher and higher until it hit the precise resonant frequency of tempered glass. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a single crack appeared on a window on the 30th floor. The crack spread, a spiderweb of fractures racing across the building's face. With a sound like a glacier calving, the entire glass facade of the skyscraper shattered. It did not explode outwards. It rained down, a literal avalanche of millions of pieces of non-lethal, diced safety glass, which cascaded onto the street below. The Raptor drones, their sensors unable to process the sudden, overwhelming deluge of debris, were buried. Their advance was not just stopped, it was literally submerged. Their intricate joints and optics clogged by the glittering tide. Kira had not defeated the army, she had changed the terrain of the war, buying precious time for trapped civilians to escape. Cassidy Cornell was going to die. That was the only thought in her mind. Her ambition, her drive for the scoop, had led her right into the heart of the kill zone. The world was a nightmare of explosions, screams, and the screech of alien metal. A Biozord had smashed the corner of the building she was hiding in, and the ceiling had come down. Her leg was pinned beneath a massive slab of concrete, the pain a white-hot nova. Through the dust, she saw a Raptor drone turn towards her, its red optical sensor locking onto her. This was it, the end of her Pulitzer dreams. The end of everything. She closed her eyes. She heard a sound, not an explosion, but a sharp, clean thwack. Then another. She dared to open her eyes. The drone was on the ground, its head severed from its body. Another drone lay in pieces beside it. And standing over her, his back to the chaos, was a figure that made her heart stop. It was him. The man from the mall. The man from the park. Naruto. He was dressed in simple civilian clothes. Yet he seemed calmer than a Zen master in a garden. He didn't speak. He simply bent down, placed his hands on the edge of the concrete slab that pinned her, a piece of rubble that must have weighed half a ton, and lifted. The strain showed on his face, the muscles in his arms cording, but he lifted it high enough for her to scramble free. Their eyes met for a fleeting second. In his, she saw no judgment for her foolishness, no recognition of her as the annoying reporter. She only saw a profound, weary determination. The look of a man who saved people because that was his function, as natural to him as breathing. He was not a hero posing for a camera. He was the real thing. He let the slab drop with a ground-shaking thud and was gone, a blonde blur vanishing back into the dust and chaos to save the next person. And the next. Cassidy sat there, her legs screaming in pain, her camera forgotten on the ground. She had her scoop, the biggest story of her life. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that she was never going to report it. Some things were more important. The war for Reefside reached its crescendo. As the Rangers, guided by Naruto, began to push back the ground forces. Mesogog played his trump card. The dimensional rift pulsed violently, and from its depths, a new horror emerged. It was a chimera, a monstrous fusion of 3 of Mesogog's most powerful failed experiments. Now bound together into a single, towering engine of destruction. It had the armored hide of a stegosaurus, the razor-sharp claws of a velociraptor, and the triple-headed fury of a hydra. It was a biomechanical god of destruction, and it radiated an energy that made Haley's sensors scream. Zords online. Tommy's voice roared. The Thundersaurus Megazord formed, a beacon of hope against the towering monstrosity. But the battle was a disaster from the start. Every blast from the Megazord's cannons, every strike of its Dino drill, was absorbed by the Chimera Zord. Pulsating, sacs on the creature's back glowed brighter with each attack, converting their power into its own. "We're just making it stronger," Ethan yelled, as the Megazord was swatted aside, crashing through a row of buildings. In Mesogog's fortress, Elsa watched the destruction on the main view screen, a cold knot of dread tightening in her stomach. Mesogog stood beside her, cackling, a sound of pure, insane triumph. "Perfection," he rasped. "The ultimate predator. It feeds on their hope and turns it into its own strength." Elsa looked at the screen, at the city burning, at the monster that represented the apex of Mesogog's philosophy. Then she looked at the doctored data drive in her hand, the one that proved Mercer was plotting against him. She looked at Mesogog's reptilian glee, the madness in his eyes. Naruto's words echoed in her mind. "He sees you as a tool, a disposable asset." She was. She knew it. Her loyalty had been born of fear and a desperate desire for survival. But this was not survival. This was a front-row seat to the apocalypse, orchestrated by a madman who would eventually turn on her. She had a choice, a life of servitude, ending as a footnote in a madman's failed experiment. Or something else. With a movement too swift for Mesogog to notice, she palmed a control panel. A silent command was sent. Her personal fighter, the Harbinger, powered up in its hidden bay. She had served her master. Now, it was time to serve herself. She turned and walked from the command center, her face a mask of cold resolve. Her betrayal would not be a whisper. It would be a sonic boom. The Megazord was on its knees. Energy levels were critical. The Chimera Zord loomed over it, its 3 heads preparing a final, devastating energy blast. "This is it," Connor said, his voice heavy with defeat. "We're not gonna make it." "Like hell we're not," Kira's voice shot back, filled with fire. Then, the sky lit up. A pillar of incandescent green and gold light slammed into the battlefield. When it faded, the Sage Dragon Ranger stood there, the Draconite gem on his chest blazing like a newborn star. "Sorry I'm late," his voice, deep and resonant, echoed through the comms. The party was just getting started. He held up his hand and a golden dragon-shaped ocarina appeared. He brought it to his helmet and played a short, haunting melody, a song that sounded ancient and impossibly powerful. In response, the dimensional rift above the city, Mesogog's gateway, pulsed with his power. It widened, and from its depths, a new Zord emerged. It was a dragon, long, serpentine, and impossibly graceful. Its body was forged from the same forest green and burnished gold as his armor. It did not roar. It moved with a silent, deadly swiftness, coiling through the air around the buildings. Its golden eyes fixed on the Chimera Zord. The Sage Dragon Zord had arrived. But it was not the only new arrival. A sleek, black, angular fighter jet screamed out of the sky. "The Harbinger," Elsa's voice, sharp and clear, cut through the comms. "Power Rangers, this is not an act of alliance. It is an act of necessity. The Chimera's energy converter is located on its back, between the shoulder blades. You have one chance. Don't miss." Quote. The black jet banked hard, evading a blast from the Chimera, and unleashed a volley of plasma torpedoes. They struck the monster's back in a brilliant explosion. The pulsating sacs ruptured, and the Chimera Zord roared in pain and fury, its energy absorption ability crippled. Elsa had created the opening. Now, Naruto and Tommy's voices shouted in perfect unison. The Dragon Zord uncoiled, firing a massive beam of pure, concentrated sage energy from its mouth. At the same time, the battered Megazord, using the last of its power, fired a full-bore blast from its chest cannon. The two beams, one of ancient natural energy, the other of prehistoric Dino power, intertwined, forming a spiraling drill of pure destruction. It struck the weakened point on the Chimera's back. For a moment, the monster shuddered, absorbing the cataclysmic energy. Then, it was too much. Cracks of golden-green light spread across its body. It swelled, and then was utterly, completely obliterated in a silent, city-shaking explosion that vaporized everything in a 5-block radius. The symphony of chaos was over. In the aftermath, as the sickly green rift sealed itself shut and the remaining drones powered down, a strange tableau formed in the heart of the ruined city. The exhausted Rangers stood beside their battered Megazord. Opposite them, Elsa's downed fighter jet hissed and steamed, its pilot emerging, shaken but alive, and in the middle, a bridge between them, stood the Sage Dragon Ranger, his new Dragonzord coiled protectively behind him like a loyal hound. The battle was won. The city was saved. But as the heroes and the traitor stared at each other across the wreckage of their common enemy, they all knew the war had just become infinitely more complicated. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Aftermath. Victory was not a triumphant roar. It was the whisper of dust settling on ruins, the distant, mournful siren song of emergency services, and the exhausted, agged sound of heroes breathing in the ashes of the city they had just saved. In the newly formed crater that had once been Reefside's financial district, a tense and impossible peace held sway. The Thundersaurus Megazord, battered and smoking, knelt like a fallen god, its head bowed in fatigue. Before it, the Dino Rangers stood, their armor scraped and cracked, their postures radiating a bone-deep weariness. Opposite them, leaning against the wreckage of her sleek black fighter jet, was Elsa. Her immaculate suit was torn, her severe bun had come undone, and a thin trickle of blood traced a path from her temple. She looked less like a triumphant traitor and more like a castaway washed up on a hostile shore. And between them, a bridge and a barrier, stood the Sage Dragon Ranger. The magnificent Dragonzord was coiled behind him, its golden eyes scanning the horizon, a silent, powerful guardian. The sheer, oppressive weight of Naruto's power was the only thing keeping the fragile truce from shattering into a dozen pieces. "Don't move, Elsa," Connor's voice, a low growl of pure hatred, crackled over the comms. "Give me one reason. Just one." Elsa met his gaze, her expression a mixture of defiance and exhaustion. "I just saved your ridiculous, oversized toy from being turned into scrap metal. I would think a thank you is in order, not a threat. The only thank you you'll get from me is a lifetime in a cage," Connor retorted, taking a threatening step forward. Naruto raised a single, armored hand. "Enough, Connor. The battle is over." "The hell it is," Connor shouted, rounding on him. "She's the enemy. She's killed people. We're not just gonna let her walk away." Before Naruto could respond, a black jeep screeched to a halt nearby. Tommy Oliver leapt out, his face grim as he took in the scene. His eyes flickered from Elsa to Naruto, then to the defiant posture of his Red Ranger. He already knew the decision he had to make, and he already knew how much it would cost him. "He's right, Connor," Tommy said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Stand down." He walked into the center of the standoff, his gaze fixed on Elsa. "You betrayed Mesogog. You have nowhere to go. He will hunt you to the ends of the earth." "I am aware of my strategic disadvantages," Elsa replied, her voice cool despite her situation. "I'm offering you a choice," Tommy continued. "Asylum. You come with us. You give us every piece of intelligence you have on Mesogog, his fortress, his forces, his weaknesses. You help us end this. In exchange, you get our protection." Ethan demorphed, his face a mask of disbelief. "Doctor, oh, you can't be serious. We can't trust her." "We don't have to trust her," Tommy shot back, his gaze unyielding. "We just have to use her. Right now, she's the single Most valuable intelligence asset on the planet. And I'm not leaving that asset out here for Mesogog to reclaim or eliminate. He turned back to Elsa. What's it going to be? Elsa looked from Tommy's pragmatic face to Connor's burning hatred, and finally to the Sage Dragon Ranger's unreadable golden visor. He had predicted this. He had maneuvered her into this position. She had walked into a trap of her own making. And its architect was now her only real shield against both her old master and her new enemies. Her freedom, it seemed, had come at the price of a new, more complicated cage. It appears I have little choice, she said, the words tasting like ash. I accept your generous offer. As Naruto's armor dissolved and Tommy escorted a now unarmed and deeply unwelcome Elsa towards the jeep. The fragile unity of the Dino Thunder Power Rangers fractured, perhaps irrevocably. They had won the battle for their city, but in the process, they had invited a monster into their home. The Dino Lab, once a sanctuary, became a pressure cooker. Elsa was placed in a shielded, transparent containment cell in a corner of the lab, for her protection and their peace of mind. She sat on the simple cot, a portrait of icy indifference. Ignoring the furious, hostile glares being directed her way. This is insane, Connor exploded, pacing the command center like a caged tiger. We're just keeping her here. In our home. What's to stop her from signaling Mesogog? Or slitting our throats in our sleep? The cell is shielded from all outgoing transmissions, Haley interjected calmly, not looking up from her analysis of the battle data. And I can assure you, its structural integrity is more than sufficient. That's not the point, Haley. Connor yelled. She's a killer. We don't make deals with terrorists. Sometimes, to win a war, you have to, Naruto said quietly. He was leaning against the far wall, his arms crossed, watching the explosive aftermath he had helped create. Connor spun to face him. His face flushed with anger. This is your fault. You're the one who brought the other one here, and now you're defending this psycho. What is your deal? Do you just collect stray villains? The accusation hung in the air, venomous and sharp. Ethan and Kira looked on, their own faces a mixture of confusion and agreement. They didn't understand his motives. My deal, Naruto began, his voice dropping, losing all its warmth and becoming the flat, hard tone of a cage addressing a rebellious genin, is to win this war. Not just the next battle, Connor. The war. And war is not won with righteous anger and brute force. It is won with strategy, with information, and with turning your enemy's greatest assets into your own. He pushed himself off the wall and walked towards the center of the room. You see her as a monster. And you are not wrong. She has done monstrous things. But I also see a weapon that was pointed at us, which I have successfully disarmed and now have the opportunity to aim back at its creator. I see the one person who knows every secret of our enemy. To throw that away because of anger, because of a need for simplistic revenge, is not just foolish. It is a dereliction of your duty as a protector of this city. He stopped directly in front of Connor, his blue eyes holding the Red Ranger's furious gaze. You fight with your heart, Connor. It is your greatest strength. And your most profound weakness. But if you let your anger blind you to the strategic realities of this situation, you will not only fail, you will get everyone in this room killed. Connor was left speechless, his rage choked by the cold, undeniable logic of Naruto's words. He had been dismissed, analyzed, and reprimanded not by a teammate, but by a commander. Tommy stepped in, placing a hand on Connor's shoulder. He's right, Connor. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but it's the only move we have. Go cool off. Connor shook his head, shrugging off Tommy's hand. He shot one last look of pure loathing at Elsa, then at Naruto, and stormed out of the lab. The fragile peace was shattered, and the team was more divided than ever. In the bright, sterile newsroom of Channel 6C, Sadie Cornell stared at her computer screen. In front of her were two documents. One was titled, Dragon Ranger, Hero OR Hoax. An exposé. It contained everything. Her blurry photos from the park. Eyewitness accounts. Her own encounter during the invasion. A detailed profile of the mysterious new transfer student, Naruto Uzumaki, whose arrival coincided perfectly with the appearance of the new ranger. It was the scoop of a lifetime. It was her ticket out of this small town, her one-way pass to the Pulitzer she so desperately craved. The other document was blank. A blinking cursor on an empty page. She thought of the moment the concrete slab had pinned her. The absolute certainty of her own death. The smell of dust and ozone. And then, his face. The look in his eyes. He hadn't saved a reporter. He hadn't saved a potential threat to his secret. He had saved a person. An act of pure, uncomplicated heroism, with no thought of reward or recognition. To expose him would be to betray that. She would be to turn that selfless act into a commodity, a story to be bought and sold. It would make her rich. It would make her famous. And it would make her feel like the smallest person on the planet. With a deep breath, she dragged the expose file into the trash bin. A pop-up appeared. Are you sure you want to permanently delete this file? She clicked, yes. Then, she turned to the blank document. And her fingers began to fly across the keyboard. Her new title. The Heart of a City, Reefside's Unsung Heroes. She wrote not of monsters and rangers, but of firefighters pulling people from wreckage. Of doctors working triage in the streets, of ordinary citizens forming bucket brigades. She wrote about the blonde stranger who had lifted a concrete slab off a terrified young woman, not naming him, but describing the quiet determination in his eyes. She wrote a story about the resilience of the human spirit. It wouldn't win her a Pulitzer. But as she wrote, a genuine, unforced smile touched her lips. For the first time, she felt like a real journalist. It's a feedback regulator, Haley said, her voice filled with a creator's pride. She held up a small, elegant device, a silver bracer etched with golden geometric patterns. I've been analyzing the energy signature from your transformation. The fusion of your chakra and the Draconite gem's connection to the morphing grid. It's a violent, unstable process. The biofeedback must be agony. Naruto looked at her, then at the bracer. They were in her private workshop, a cluttered, chaotic space that was Haley's true home. The transformation is demanding, he admitted, an understatement of epic proportions. This will help, she said, her usual rapid-fire speech softening. It won't make it painless. But it will harmonize the energy frequencies. It learns from you. It analyzes your chakra flow and helps to smooth the integration with the grid. It should increase your efficiency by at least 12% and reduce the post-transformation cellular decay by almost 30%. She wasn't just giving him a piece of technology. She was showing him that she understood. She had seen his pain, quantified it, and then had built a solution. It was the most intimate, most personal gift she could possibly give. It was an upgrade for his body, forged from the workings of her brilliant mind and her growing affection. He took the bracer, its metal cool and smooth against his calloused fingers. Haley, thank you. The words felt inadequate. Don't thank me, she said, turning back to a schematic on her screen, a faint blush on her cheeks. Just try not to break it. It's a prototype. He slipped the bracer onto his wrist. It hummed softly, a perfect harmony of ancient energy and modern science. A perfect reflection of the woman who had made it. He found Conan in the forest, standing in a moonlit clearing. A single, perfect, blue paper rose rested in her palm. I heard the argument, she said without turning around. The Red Ranger does not trust you. He is young, Naruto replied, standing beside her. He sees the world in absolutes. He has not yet learned that the lines between ally and enemy are often blurred. In our world, they were never blurred, Conan countered, her voice laced with a bitter nostalgia. They were simply redrawn in blood, day after day. It was simpler, was it? Naruto asked softly. She fell silent. She knew it wasn't. Their world had been a complex, brutal knot of betrayals and shifting allegiances. This world, for all its chaos, was a far more innocent place. The battle today, she began, her gaze distant. Watching you direct them, listening to you on the comms, you sounded like a Hokage, leading the village. The compliment was quiet, but deeply felt. You have found a new purpose here, Naruto. I have found a new battle, he corrected. Purpose implies a future. I am still searching for that. He looked at her, at the last piece of his past. But I am glad I do not have to search alone. Conan finally looked at him, her amber eyes reflecting the moonlight. The paper rose in her hand unfolded, transforming into a blue paper butterfly that fluttered from her palm and landed gently on his shoulder. It was a small, silent gesture, but it spoke volumes. It was an acceptance, an acknowledgement of their shared fate. They were the last two of their kind, a serpent and an angel in a world of dinosaurs and teenagers. And whatever future they had, they would face it together. Kira cornered him on the deck overlooking the darkened forest. The sounds of Haley's lab and the tension from the rest of the house felt a million miles away. "We need to talk," she said, her voice tight with an emotion he couldn't quite decipher. Naruto turned from the railing to face her. "Kira, don't. Kira, me," she said, stepping into his personal space, her eyes blazing with an intensity that rivaled any battle. "Today, out there, when that chimera thing had the Megazord on the ropes, I thought we were dead. I thought I was dead. But you weren't," he said gently. "You survived. You all did." "That's not the point," she snapped, poking a finger into his chest. "The only thing I could think about was you. That you were back here. That you might get hurt. That I might never. That we might never." She trailed off, frustrated by her own inability to articulate the storm of feelings inside her. "So I'm just gonna say it," she finally blurted out, the words a frantic, breathless rush. "I think I'm falling for you, you idiot. I don't know why. You're frustrating, and you're secretive. And you have more baggage than an international airport. But you're also brave, and kind, and you have this stupid, noble, heroic thing going on that is driving me completely crazy. And I needed you to know." She stood there, chest heaving, her declaration hanging in the night air between them. Naruto was stunned into silence. He had faced down gods and monsters, but the raw, unfiltered honesty of this girl's confession had disarmed him completely. He saw the hope and the fear warring in her eyes. He knew that any flippant or dismissive answer would crush her. He reached out and gently took her hand. It was trembling. "Kira," he began, his voice soft and filled with a profound, weary honesty. I don't know what to say. In my world, I lost everything. Everyone. My heart it's a battlefield. And it is not ready for a new war." He met her gaze, his own blue eyes filled with a sorrow she had only glimpsed before. "You are an amazing woman. You are fierce, and talented. And you burn with a light that this world desperately needs. And any man would be lucky to have you. But I am not that man. Not right now. Maybe not ever." He squeezed her hand gently. "I cannot give you the answer you want to hear. But I can give you the truth. And the truth is, you are one of the most important people in this new, strange life of mine. And I am honored that you feel that way. Truly." Tears welled in Kira's eyes, but she didn't pull her hand away. It wasn't the answer she had dreamed of, but it wasn't a rejection, either. It was something more painful, and more beautiful. It was the truth. She nodded, unable to speak, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. He found Elsa in her cell. She was sitting on the cot, staring at the wall, her icy facade finally gone, replaced by a profound, hollow emptiness. She had betrayed her master, her cause, everything she had known for years. She was adrift. Naruto didn't speak. He simply approached the transparent wall, dematerialized a small tray through it, and set it down on the floor. On it was a steaming bowl of soup and a piece of bread. A simple, human meal. Elsa looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. She looked at the food, then at him. "Why?" Her voice was a rough whisper. "Because tactical advantages and strategic assets don't get hungry," Naruto replied simply. "But people do." He turned to leave. "Uzumaki," she called out, her voice stopping him. He turned back. The cold mask was gone. In its place was a vulnerability so raw it was startling. "The things you said, in the lab, about Mesogog, about freedom." She took a shaky breath. "Thank you." It was not the thanks of a general or a villain. It was the quiet, desperate gratitude of a prisoner who had just been handed the key to her own cage. Even if she didn't know how to use it yet. Naruto simply nodded, and then he was gone. Later, the entire, fractured team was reassembled in the command center. The air was still thick with tension, but it was overlaid with a blanket of sheer exhaustion. Connor was back, his anger muted to a sullen silence. Naruto placed the crystal drive containing Mercer's complete, uncorrupted research onto the console. "This is it," he said, his voice drawing the attention of everyone in the room. "This is the key, the cure for Mercer, the weapon against Mesogog. This is the endgame." Haley interfaced the drive, schematics, genetic codes, and complex equations filled the main screen. They had a path. A final, desperate, and terrifyingly complicated path. Naruto looked at the faces around him. At the angry, resentful Red Ranger. At the brilliant, caring scientist. At the rebellious, heartbroken musician. At the stoic, loyal shinobi angel. At the cautious, burdened veteran leader. And at the broken, beautiful monster in the glass cage. This was his army. This was his new, impossible, fractured family. The final battle was coming. And for the first time, he felt he had something to lose again. Chapter 9 End. The End. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.